A brother's greed, a cowboy's gamble, a child that would change everything. When Rhett Mallory heard a man auctioning his own sister outside a saloon in 1859 Nebraska, he should have walked away. Instead, he bid $500 for a terrified woman he'd never met, and discovered she carried more than just scars from her past. This is the story of Elena Carver, the girl sold like livestock, and the rancher who found his salvation in saving her. Stay until the end and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The moon hung fat and silver over the Nebraska Territory grasslands, painting everything in shades of ash and bone. Elena Carver's lungs burned as she ran, her bare feet slapping against packed earth, still warm from the day's brutal sun. Behind her, voices rose in anger, men's voices, thick with whiskey and entitlement, punctuated by her brother's familiar snarl. "God damn it, Elena, you're making this harder than it needs to be." Silas. Her own blood. The boy who'd once helped her catch fireflies in mason jars now hunted her through the dark like she was nothing more than escaped livestock. She stumbled over a wagon rut, caught herself against a fence post, kept moving. Her dress, the only one she owned, caught on something and tore with a sound like ripping flesh. She didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Because stopping meant going back to those men, the ones Silas had promised her to, the ones who'd looked at her like she was meat on a hook. The Dust Lantern Saloon materialized out of the darkness ahead, its yellow windows spilling light across the rutted main street of what passed for a town out here. Horses lined the hitching posts, laughter and piano music leaked through the walls. Elena's first instinct was to avoid it. Proper women didn't go near saloons, especially not alone, especially not at night. But propriety was a luxury for women who had choices. She had none. Elena burst through the swinging doors and into a wall of noise and tobacco smoke. Conversations died mid-sentence. The piano player's hands froze on the keys. Every face in the room turned toward her, weathered ranchers, cowboys in from the range, the saloon girls in their bright dresses and painted faces, all of them staring at this wild-eyed woman in a torn dress, gasping for breath, clearly running from something. "Please," Elena managed, her voice raw. "Please, I need—" The door slammed open behind her. Silas Carver stood in the entrance, silhouetted against the night, 3 men flanking him. Her brother looked nothing like the boy she remembered. Drink and meanness had carved cruel lines into his face, turned his eyes hard as creek stones. He was 26 now, 8 years her senior, and every one of those years had made him more of a stranger. "There you are," Silas said, his voice dripping false pleasantness. "Making a scene, as usual." The saloon remained silent. This was the frontier. People minded their business, especially when family matters were concerned. A man's right to handle his own kin how he saw fit was rarely questioned out here. Elena backed toward the bar, her hand finding the edge of the polished wood, her heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. "I'm not going with you, Silas. Not to them." "You don't got a choice, sister." Silas stepped fully into the saloon, his boots loud on the wooden floor. "Deal's already made." "Money's already promised." "You can't sell me. I'm not property." Silas laughed, a sound like stones grinding together. "Out here, women are whatever their family says they are. And since Pa died, I'm the head of this family. What I say goes." One of the men behind Silas, a thick-necked brute with a beard like steel wool, leered at Elena. "Come on now, girl. We paid good money. Don't make this difficult." "Difficult?" Elena's voice cracked. "You're talking about me like I'm a horse." "Horse would be less trouble," the man muttered, drawing chuckles from his companions. Something inside Elena snapped. Fear crystallized into fury, white-hot and clarifying. She grabbed the nearest object, a half-full whiskey bottle someone had left on the bar, and hurled it. The bottle caught Silas square in the chest, whiskey splashing across his shirt, the glass shattering at his feet. The saloon erupted. Silas lunged forward with a roar. Elena tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. The crowd pressed in, forming an inadvertent arena. Silas caught her arm, his fingers digging bruises into her flesh. She fought like a cornered cat, scratching, kicking, trying to twist away. The steel-wool beard man grabbed her other arm. Between them, they hauled her toward the doors. "Let me go! Somebody help me! Please!" But the faces around her remained impassive. This was family business, not their concern. Through the chaos, Elena caught a glimpse of the saloon girls. One of them, a redhead with sad eyes, looked away deliberately. Another shook her head slightly, a warning. Don't fight. You'll only make it worse. They were right. She was alone. Nobody was coming. Silas dragged her into the street. The night air hit her face, cool and clean, such a contrast to the suffocating grip on her arms. She tried one last time to wrench free, but Silas backhanded her, a casual violence that snapped her head to the side and filled her mouth with the copper taste of blood. Should have done this months ago, Silas hissed, shaking her like a rag doll. Dragging your feet, acting like you're too good for honest work. Well, you're going to work now, sister. These gentlemen paid $300 for you. You're going to do exactly what they say when they say it, and maybe you'll work off your keep. 300? Elena's laugh came out broken. That's what I'm worth to you? $300? More than you're worth to me free, Silas shot back. At least this way you're useful. The steel wool man stepped closer, running his eyes over Elena like she was livestock at auction. She'll do. Bit scrawny, but we'll fatten her up. Good teeth? He reached for her face. Elena bit him. The man howled, jerking his hand back, blood welling from the teeth marks on his palm. You little bitch! His fist came up. Elena braced for the blow. 500! The voice cut through the night like a blade. Deep, calm, carrying the kind of authority that made men stop and listen without quite knowing why. Everyone froze. A man stepped out of the shadows beside the saloon, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a canvas duster that had seen 1,000 miles of trail dust. His hat was pulled low, but Elena could see the edge of his jaw, stubbled and strong. He moved with the easy grace of a man completely comfortable in his own skin, someone who'd never had to prove himself because everyone already knew. $500, the man repeated, looking at Silas. That's my bid. Silas blinked, confusion replacing anger. What? You're selling. The stranger gestured at Elena with one gloved hand. I'm buying. 500. That's 200 more than these gentlemen offered. The steel wool man released Elena's arm, rounding on the newcomer. Now wait just a damn minute. You wait. The stranger's voice didn't rise, but something in it made the larger man take a step back. I made an offer. The seller can accept or decline, but if I were him, I'd take the better deal. Elena stared at this man, this stranger, trying to understand what was happening. Was this better, or just a different brand of hell? At least with Silas's deal, she'd known what to expect. This man was an unknown quantity, dangerous in a different way, quiet, controlled, but no less deadly for it. Silas licked his lips, calculation replacing fury in his expression. 500, he said slowly, testing the words. Cash? Cash. The stranger reached into his duster and produced a leather pouch, heavy with coin. He tossed it to Silas, who caught it reflexively. Count it if you want, but I'm not a patient man, and your sister looks about ready to collapse. It was true. Now that the immediate violence had paused, Elena felt her legs trembling, threatening to give out. Her face throbbed where Silas had struck her. Her bare feet stung from cuts and scrapes, and underneath all of it, a deeper exhaustion, the kind that came from months of fear, of knowing this moment was coming and being powerless to stop it. Silas opened the pouch, his eyes going wide at the gleam of gold coins. Real money. More than he'd probably seen in years. Elena watched her brother's face and saw the moment he made his choice. She'd always known Silas was weak, but she'd harbored some small, foolish hope that blood would matter more than gold. It didn't. She's yours, Silas said, pocketing the pouch without counting. Good riddance. Girl's been nothing but trouble anyway. The steel wool man started to protest. We had a deal. And now I got a better one. Silas grinned, showing his teeth. Business is business, friend. No hard feelings. The hell there ain't. Quote steel wool rounded on the stranger. I don't know who you think you are coming in here. The stranger finally looked directly at the man. In the moonlight, Elena caught a glimpse of his face, weathered, probably mid-30s, with eyes the color of winter frost. Something in that gaze made the larger man's words die in his throat. I'm the man who outbid you, the stranger said quietly. And I'm the man who's going to walk away now with what I paid for. The question is whether you're going to be smart and accept that, or stupid and try to stop me. His hand rested casually on his hip, near where his coat hung open. Elena caught the glint of a pistol butt. But more than that, she saw the way he stood, balanced, ready, utterly unafraid. This was a man who'd faced down trouble before and won. Steel Wool must have seen it too. He backed off, muttering curses, his companions following suit. They disappeared into the darkness, their angry voices fading. Silas spat in the dust at Elena's feet. You always did think you were special, he said to her, his voice thick with contempt. Enjoy your new life, sister. Hope it's everything you deserve. He turned and walked away without looking back. Just like that. 8 years of shared history, of being the only family each other had left after their parents died. Gone. Traded for a pouch of gold coins. Elena stood in the empty street, her torn dress hanging off one shoulder, blood drying on her lip, watching her brother disappear into the saloon. She felt nothing. Numbness had crept in, merciful and complete. Can you walk? The stranger's voice startled her. She'd almost forgotten he was there. Elena turned to look at him properly for the first time. He was tall. She had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. In the moonlight, his face was all hard planes and shadowed angles, but his expression was not kind exactly, but not cruel either. Wary, maybe. Resigned. I asked if you can walk, he repeated, gentler this time. Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. Good. My horse is around back. We've got about an hour's ride to my ranch. You fall off, I'm not coming back for you. The words were harsh, but something in his tone suggested he didn't mean them, or maybe Elena was just desperate enough to hear kindness where none existed. She followed him around the side of the saloon, her feet leaving small smears of blood on the packed earth. His horse was a massive bay gelding, 16 hands at least, with intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor despite the chaos. The stranger, Elena realized she didn't even know his name, mounted in one smooth motion and extended a hand down to her. She hesitated. This was it, the moment of no return. Once she took his hand, once she mounted that horse, she was his. Bought and paid for, same as if Silas's original deal had gone through. The only difference was the price and the buyer. But what choice did she have? Go back into the saloon, beg for help from people who'd already proven they wouldn't give it? Try to survive on her own out here with no money, no shoes, no supplies? Elena took his hand. His grip was firm but careful, aware of his own strength. He pulled her up behind him as if she weighed nothing, settling her onto the horse's broad back. Elena grabbed onto his coat, holding tight as he urged the gelding into motion. They rode through the small cluster of buildings that passed for a town, past the general store and the blacksmith and the tiny church that nobody used except for weddings and funerals. Then they were out into open country, endless rolling grassland silvered by moonlight, stretching away to horizons Elena couldn't see. The horse moved beneath her with a rocking gait that would have been soothing under other circumstances. Instead, Elena used every ounce of her focus to stay conscious, to not slide sideways and tumble into the grass. Her hands ached from gripping the stranger's coat. Her head swam. "What's your name?" His voice carried back to her over the sound of hoofbeats. "Elena," she managed. "Elena Carver." "Rhett Mallory." He didn't turn around. "The ranch is called Broken Creek. Been in my family since before I was born. It's about 800 acres, cattle mostly, some horses. I've got 4 men who work for me, and a woman named Clara Boone who handles the house and cooking." Elena tried to focus on his words, to understand what he was telling her and why. Was this meant to be reassuring, a description of her new prison? "I want you to understand something," Rhett continued, his voice steady. "I didn't buy you to use you. That's not what this is." Elena's laugh came out bitter. "Then what is it? Honestly?" For the first time, she heard uncertainty in his voice. "I'm not entirely sure, but I know what it's not. It's not what those men had planned. It's not slavery. You're not property, no matter what your brother seems to think." "Then why did you pay $500 for me?" Silence. Just the rhythmic thud of hoofbeats, the whisper of grass against the horse's legs. Elena thought maybe he wouldn't answer. Because I couldn't walk away, Rhett finally said, so quietly she almost missed it. I've seen a lot of ugly things in my life, Miss Carver. I've done things I'm not proud of. But watching a man sell his own sister, I couldn't just let that happen. Not if I could stop it. Elena didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know if she believed him. Men said pretty words all the time. It was their actions that mattered, and she'd only known Rhett Mallory for 20 minutes. Not nearly long enough to judge his character or his intentions. Still, he hadn't hurt her, hadn't touched her beyond what was necessary to get her on the horse. And when he'd looked at her back in town, she hadn't seen the same hunger that had been in Steel Wool's eyes. Just wariness. And maybe something like pity, though she hated the thought of that. What happens when we get to your ranch? Elena asked. Clara will look after you, get you cleaned up, fed, give you a place to sleep. In the morning, we'll figure out the rest. The rest of what? Of how this is going to work. He shifted slightly in the saddle. I wasn't planning on having a woman on the ranch, Miss Carver. This complicates things. But we'll manage, always do. Elena absorbed this, trying to read between the lines. You're saying I have to work. Everyone works at Broken Creek, but you'll be treated fair and you'll be safe. That's more than you had an hour ago. It was. She hated that it was. Hated that her life had come to this, being grateful to a stranger who'd bought her like livestock because at least he promised not to rape her. But that was the reality. This was survival now. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. The landscape changed gradually as they rode, the grassland giving way to rolling hills, then to steeper terrain dotted with scrub oak and juniper. In the distance, Elena could make out darker shapes that might have been mountains, or might have been storm clouds. It was hard to tell in the moonlight. Her eyelids grew heavy. The adrenaline that had kept her running, fighting, alert was finally draining away, leaving nothing but bone-deep exhaustion in its wake. She caught herself starting to slip and jerked upright, her grip tightening on Rhett's coat. It's not much farther, he said. Try to stay awake. I'm trying. Try harder. I meant what I said. I'm not coming back for you. But his voice held a hint of something that might have been humor, dry and understated. Elena found herself almost smiling despite everything. Almost. They crested a hill, and there it was, Broken Creek Ranch spread out in the shallow valley below. A main house, low and sprawling, built from rough-hewn logs that gleamed silver in the moonlight. A barn, several outbuildings, corrals with dark shapes that had to be horses or cattle. Lamplight glowed in one window of the house, warm and inviting. It looked solid, permanent, the kind of place that had been there for years and would be there for years more. Elena had never lived anywhere like that. Her family had always been transient, following work, following opportunity, following her father's increasingly desperate schemes to strike it rich. They'd never had a home, just a series of temporary shelters between disappointments. Rhett guided the horse down the slope and into the ranch yard. Before they'd even reached the main house, the door opened and a woman stepped out onto the porch. She was perhaps 50, built solid and square like someone who'd never avoided a day's work in her life. Her hair, steel gray, was pulled back in a severe bun. She wore a simple dress and an apron and held a lantern that threw dancing shadows across the weathered boards of the porch. Rhett Mallory, the woman said, her voice carrying clearly across the yard. Where in God's name have you been, and what? She stopped, the lantern light falling on Elena. Who is that? Her name is Elena Carver. Rhett dismounted and reached up to help Elena down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground, and only his hand on her elbow kept her upright. She's going to be staying with us for a while. She needs food, medical attention, and a place to sleep. Clara, this had to be Clara Boone, descended the porch steps with surprising speed for a woman her size. She took one look at Elena, at her torn dress, her bloody face, her bare feet, and her expression shifted from confusion to fury. Who did this to you, child? Elena opened her mouth, but no words came out. She was so tired. So impossibly tired. Long story, Rhett said. I'll explain after we get her inside. Can you... I know my job, Clara interrupted, already taking Elena's arm with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with her stern demeanor. Come on, sweetheart, let's get you cleaned up. Rhett, put that horse away and then make yourself scarce. I don't need you underfoot while I work." Rhett nodded, already leading the bay toward the barn. Elena let Clara guide her into the house, too exhausted to do anything but follow. The interior was exactly what she'd expected from the outside, practical, spare, but clean and well-maintained. They passed through a main room with a stone fireplace and simple furniture, then down a short hallway to what had to be Clara's domain. A large kitchen that smelled of bread and wood smoke and herbs hanging from the rafters to dry. Clara settled Elena into a chair at the long wooden table. "Don't move," she ordered, then bustled around gathering supplies. A basin of water, clean rags, what looked like a medical kit. She worked with the efficiency of someone who'd patched up injuries before, cleaning the cuts on Elena's feet first, then gently washing the blood from her face. "Your lip is split," Clara said, dabbing at it with a damp cloth. "But it's not bad enough to need stitching. The bruise on your cheek, though, that'll be ugly for a few days. Who hit you?" "My brother," Elena whispered. Clara's hand stilled for just a moment. Then she continued her work, her touch somehow even gentler. "I see. And is your brother the reason you were with Rhett?" "My brother sold me." The words came out flat, emotionless. "To some men. For $300. Rhett bid higher." Clara set down the cloth and looked Elena directly in the eyes. "Rhett Mallory is a good man," she said firmly. "Hard sometimes. Not great with words, but good, down to his bones. Whatever he told you his intentions are, you can believe him. He won't hurt you." Elena wanted to believe that. She did, but she'd spent too long learning not to trust, not to hope. Trust got you hurt. Hope made the disappointment sharper. "Why would he spend $500 on a stranger?" she asked. Clara smiled, a small, sad expression. "Because that's who he is. Rhett's always been the type to step in when others walk away. Drives him near crazy sometimes, I think. That sense of responsibility. But it's also what makes him worth working for, worth trusting." She returned to her work, applying some kind of salve to Elena's feet that stung before going cool and soothing. When that was done, she produced a simple cotton nightgown and a rough wool blanket. "There's a room off the kitchen," Clara said. "Not much, just a bed and a chair, but it's clean and private. You'll stay there tonight. Tomorrow we'll see about getting you proper clothes and figuring out a more permanent arrangement." "Clara?" Elena caught the older woman's hand. "Thank you." Clara squeezed her fingers. "Nothing to thank me for, child. This is just basic human decency. Though I'll admit that's rarer than it should be out here." She helped Elena to her feet. "Come on, you're dead on your feet." The room was exactly as described. Small, simple, but blessedly private. The bed looked like heaven. Elena changed into the nightgown with the last of her energy and collapsed onto the mattress. It was lumpy and probably filled with straw, but after sleeping on hard ground for weeks while Silas dragged her from place to place, it felt like luxury. She was asleep before Clara had even closed the door. Dreams came, fractured and dark. Silas's face looming over her, the steel wool man's hands reaching, running through endless grass while her lungs burned and burned and burned. Then different images. Her mother's face before the fever took her, kind and sad. Her father's funeral, Silas standing beside the grave, already calculating how to profit from their loss. And underneath it all, a deeper fear, a secret she hadn't yet shared with anyone, barely acknowledged to herself. She was pregnant, 2 months gone, maybe 3. Hard to tell exactly, but the morning sickness had started weeks ago, and her monthly bleeding had stopped. Elena knew what that meant. She'd seen enough pregnant women in the various camps and settlements they'd passed through. The father was a gambler named Colton Hayes, one of Silas's drinking companions. Her brother had offered her to him one night to cover a debt, and Colton had taken what Silas offered. It hadn't been violent. Colton had even been gentle in his way, but it hadn't been her choice, and that made all the difference. When Elena had realized she was pregnant, Silas had seen it as a solution rather than a problem. Damaged goods, he'd called her. Might as well sell her off while she was still useful. The men who'd bought her tonight hadn't known about the baby. Silas had planned to keep that secret until after the transaction was complete. But now, Elena's hand drifted to her stomach, still flat, showing no sign of the life growing inside. What would Rhett Mallory do when he found out? Would he send her away? Demand his money back from Silas? Would this precarious safety she'd found evaporate like morning dew? Sleep dragged her back under before she could pursue that thought any further. What? When Elena woke, sunlight was streaming through the small window, painting golden squares on the rough wooden floor. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back, the chase, the saloon, Rhett Mallory stepping out of the shadows with his quiet voice and his $500. She sat up slowly, inventorying her injuries. Her feet throbbed, her face ached, but she was clean, fed, and safe. For now. A soft knock on the door. "You awake in there?" Clara's voice. "Yes?" "Good. I've got clothes for you. Not fancy, but they'll fit better than that torn thing you came in wearing. Get dressed and come out to the kitchen. We need to talk." Elena found a simple dress laid over the chair, blue cotton, well-worn but clean. It fit reasonably well, though it was loose in the shoulders. Clara's probably, or borrowed from someone larger. She pulled on the dress and the stockings and shoes that came with it, then made her way to the kitchen. Clara was at the stove, frying eggs and bacon in a large cast-iron skillet. The smell made Elena's stomach growl, then flip. She swallowed hard against a wave of nausea. "Sit," Clara ordered, not turning around. "Food will be ready in a minute." Elena sat. Through the window, she could see the ranch yard in daylight. The barn bigger than she'd realized, the corrals holding perhaps a dozen horses, cattle grazing in distant pastures. Men moved around the yard, working. She caught a glimpse of Rhett, his tall frame recognizable even at a distance, talking to one of the ranch hands. Clara set a plate in front of her. Eggs, bacon, thick slices of bread with butter. Simple food, but more than Elena had seen in weeks. She ate slowly, forcing herself not to wolf it down despite her hunger. "Rhett told me what happened last night," Clara said, sitting across from Elena with her own plate. "Your brother sold you. Rhett bought you instead. That about sum it up?" Elena nodded. "And now you're here, with no idea what comes next." Another nod. Clara ate a few bites, studying Elena over the rim of her coffee cup. "I'm going to be blunt with you, child. This is a working ranch. Everyone here earns their keep. Rhett might have bought you, but he's not keeping you like some kind of pet. You're going to need to work." "I can work," Elena said quickly. "I'm not afraid of hard labor." "Good, because there's plenty of it. I could use help in the house. Cooking, cleaning, laundry, mending. The men are hard on clothes and eat like locusts. Can you sew?" "Yes, my mother taught me." "Can you cook?" "Basic things, nothing fancy." Clara nodded, seeming satisfied. "That'll do. We'll start you on simple tasks, see what you're good at. You'll have a place to sleep, 3 meals a day, and safety. In exchange, you work. That fair?" It was more than fair. It was better than Elena had any right to expect, but still, she had to ask. And Mr. Mallory? What does he expect from me?" Clara's expression softened slightly. "Rhett expects you to pull your weight, same as everyone else. Beyond that?" She shook her head. "That man wouldn't force himself on a woman if his life depended on it. I've known him since he was 18 years old, and I've never once seen him treat a woman with anything but respect. Firm, yes, demanding sometimes, but never cruel, never forceful." Elena wanted to believe that. Some part of her, the part that hadn't been entirely crushed by fear and betrayal, wanted desperately to believe that men like that existed, that not everyone was like Silas or Colton Hayes or the steel-wool man with his leering eyes. "There's something else," Elena said quietly. She had to tell someone. The secret was burning a hole in her, and if she was going to stay here, Clara deserved to know. "I'm pregnant." Clara's coffee cup stopped halfway to her lips. She set it down slowly, her eyes never leaving Elena's face. "How far along?" 2, maybe 3 months. It's hard to tell exactly." "The father?" "A gambler, friend of my brother's. Silas offered me to him to cover a debt." Elena's voice stayed flat, clinical. Easier that way. "I don't know where he is now, probably moved on to the next town, the next card game." Clara absorbed this information with remarkable calm. Does Rhett know? No, I haven't told anyone. I didn't know how. Well, you're going to have to tell him. Clara stood, beginning to clear the plates. But not today. You've been through enough. Get settled in first. Learn your way around. Build your strength back up. But Elena. She turned, fixing the younger woman with a serious look. You will need to tell him. Soon. He's going to notice eventually, and it's better coming from you than him figuring it out on his own. Will he send me away? I don't think so. Clara returned to washing dishes. But I won't lie to you. It complicates things. A baby needs care, needs supplies. It changes what you can and can't do around the ranch. But Rhett's not heartless. We'll figure something out. Elena helped Clara with the dishes, grateful for something to do with her hands. Through the window, she watched Rhett work, moving cattle from one pasture to another, checking fences, talking with his men. He moved with purpose, never wasting motion, comfortable in his element. What kind of man was he, really? The kind who'd step in to save a stranger, or the kind who'd regret his impulse once he learned the full truth? Only time would tell. As Elena dried the last plate, Clara handed her a list. Laundry needs doing. You'll find the wash tubs out back, next to the pump. Water needs heating first. There's a fire pit and a big kettle. Should take you most of the morning. Think you can handle that? Elena took the list. Her feet still ached. Her body was still exhausted, but she could work. Work had always been her escape, her way of proving she was more than the worthless burden Silas claimed. I can handle it. Good girl. Clara smiled, the first real smile Elena had seen from her. Welcome to Broken Creek Ranch, Elena Carver. It's not much, but it's home. As Elena headed outside with her basket of laundry, she thought about that word, home. She'd never really had one of those. Maybe if she was careful, if she worked hard enough, if the secret growing inside her didn't destroy this fragile safety, maybe she could have one here. The days began to blur together, forming a rhythm Elena hadn't known since before her father died. Wake before dawn. Help Clara prepare breakfast for the men. Clean up. Start the day's work. Laundry on Monday, mending on Tuesday. Helping with cooking the rest of the week. Simple tasks, but endless. The ranch was a living thing that demanded constant attention. Elena fell into bed exhausted every night, but it was a different kind of exhaustion than she'd known before. This was earned, honest, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, nobody hit her, nobody screamed at her, nobody told her she was worthless, a burden, less than nothing. Rhett remained distant, polite but reserved. He acknowledged her with nods when they crossed paths in the yard, thanked her when she brought him coffee while he worked, but made no effort to engage her in conversation. Elena didn't know if this was relief or disappointment. Maybe both. Clara noticed. Give him time, she said one afternoon as they sat on the porch shelling peas. Rhett's not comfortable around women. Never has been. His mother died when he was 12, and after that it was just him and his father out here. He's forgotten how to talk to women, if he ever knew in the first place. He seems to talk to you just fine, Elena pointed out. Clara laughed. I'm old and bossy. Doesn't count. You're young and pretty. That makes him nervous. Pretty. Elena almost laughed at that. She didn't feel pretty. She felt used, damaged, like a broken tool someone had bought at a discount. But as the days passed, something strange happened. The constant fear that had lived in her chest for months began to ease just slightly. Enough to breathe, enough to sometimes go hours without thinking about Silas or Colton Hayes or the men who'd paid $300 for her. Enough to start imagining, just briefly, just in unguarded moments, that maybe she could have a life here. A real life, not just survival. Then the morning sickness got worse. Elena managed to hide it for the first week, sneaking outside to be sick in the bushes behind the house. But Clara had sharp eyes and sharper instincts. One morning, Elena barely made it out the kitchen door before losing her breakfast. When she came back in, pale and shaking, Clara was waiting with a glass of water and a knowing look. You need to tell him, Clara said gently. Today. I know. Elena accepted the water, sipping slowly. I don't know how. The same way you told me. Straight out. No dancing around it. Rhett appreciates honesty. That evening, Elena finally worked up the courage. She found Rhett in the barn, checking on a mare that was due to foal soon. He looked up when she entered, surprise crossing his face. "Miss Carver, everything all right?" No, nothing was all right. But that wasn't what he was asking. "Mr. Mallory, I need to tell you something." Elena twisted her hands together, forcing herself to meet his eyes. "I should have told you sooner, but I was afraid. I'm pregnant." The words hung in the dusty air between them. Rhett's expression didn't change, didn't shift to anger or disgust or disappointment. He just looked at her steadily, waiting. 2, maybe 3 months along, Elena continued, the words tumbling out now that she'd started. "The father was a gambler. My brother offered me to him to cover a debt. I don't know where he is now, and even if I did, he wouldn't want—" She trailed off, hating how weak her voice sounded. Rhett was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded once, decisively. "Does Clara know?" "Yes." "And she thinks you can still work?" "For now. Later, when I'm further along, we'll figure it out." Rhett turned back to the mare, running his hand along her flank. "A child is never a burden, Miss Carver. If that's what you're worried about, that I'll send you away because of this, you can stop worrying. You're safe here. You and the baby both." Elena felt something crack open in her chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. "You mean that?" He looked at her again, and this time she saw something in his expression beyond wariness, something like understanding. "My mother died giving birth to my brother," he said quietly. "The baby died too. I was 12. I watched my father. It broke something in him. He was never the same. So yeah, Miss Carver, I mean it. Children are precious, and any woman brave enough to carry one, especially under circumstances like yours, deserves protection and care." Tears burned at the back of Elena's throat. She swallowed them down, crying would be weak, would be giving in, and she'd promised herself she wouldn't do that anymore. "Thank you," she managed. Rhett nodded again, awkward now. "You should get back to the house. Clara will worry." It was a dismissal, but not an unkind one. Elena left the barn, walking slowly across the yard as the sun set in streaks of orange and gold. Behind her, she heard Rhett resume his work. The soft sounds of him moving around the barn, checking on the animals in his care. A child is never a burden. Elena placed her hand over her still flat stomach and allowed herself for the first time to imagine this child as something real. Someone real. A tiny person who would need her, depend on her, love her. Someone who might finally give her a reason to believe in hope again. That night, Elena slept without nightmares for the first time since Silas had sold her. And when she woke the next morning to birdsong and sunlight, she realized that Clara had been right about something. Broken Creek Ranch was starting to feel like home. The weeks that followed brought a strange kind of peace Elena had never known. Each morning she woke to the sound of roosters crowing and the low murmur of men's voices in the yard. Each evening she fell asleep to the distant lowing of cattle and the whisper of wind through the eaves. In between, there was work, endless, exhausting, but honest work that left her body tired and her mind mercifully quiet. Clara became her anchor in those early days. The older woman had a way of knowing when Elena needed guidance and when she needed space. She taught Elena how to make bread that rose properly, how to patch trousers so the mend wouldn't show, how to read the weather by the color of the sky at dawn. Small skills, practical knowledge, but each one made Elena feel more capable, more real. "You're a quick learner," Clara said one afternoon as Elena successfully flipped a batch of flapjacks without burning them. "Your mother taught you well." Elena felt the familiar ache at the mention of her mother. "She tried. She died when I was 14. After that, it was just me and Silas and Pa. And Pa—" She trailed off, not wanting to speak ill of the dead, but unable to summon kind words either. "Your father wasn't kind to you," Clara said. It wasn't a question. He wasn't unkind, he was just absent. Even when he was there, he wasn't really there. After Mama died, he spent all his time chasing dreams, gold strikes, land deals, schemes that were supposed to make us rich. They never did. And when he died, he left Silas nothing but debts. And me. Clara wiped her hands on her apron, her expression thoughtful. Silas chose what to do with that inheritance. He could have protected you, could have been the brother you deserved. He chose something else instead. That's on him, not you. The words settled over Elena like a blanket, warm, comforting, but also heavy with truth she was still learning to accept. For so long, Silas had convinced her that she was the burden, the problem, the reason their lives were so hard. Hearing Clara say otherwise, hearing someone validate that Silas had failed her rather than the reverse, was almost more than Elena could process. She focused on the flapjacks, flipping the last one onto the serving plate. Through the kitchen window, she could see Rhett working with one of the horses in the corral, a young mare that was still green, still learning. He moved with patience, never forcing, always giving the animal time to understand what he was asking. Elena found herself watching him more often than she probably should, trying to understand this man who'd bought her freedom but asked for nothing in return. He kept his distance, mostly. Polite nods in passing, brief words of thanks when she brought coffee to the men working in the fields, but nothing more. At meals, he sat at the head of the long table in the main room, while the ranch hands filled the other seats, talking and laughing and eating with the efficiency of men who'd worked hard and earned their food. Elena served alongside Clara, then ate her own meal in the kitchen after everyone else was finished. It was better this way, she told herself. Distance was safety. Distance meant no expectations, no assumptions, no risk. But sometimes, when she caught Rhett looking at her across the yard, his expression unreadable, something like concern in his winter frost eyes, Elena wondered what would happen if she closed that distance. What would she find? Kindness? Disappointment? Regret that he'd spent $500 on a pregnant woman who would never be able to repay him? "Stop staring," Clara said, making Elena jump. "I wasn't—" "Yes, you were." Clara's smile took the sting from her words. "And he was staring back when you weren't looking. You two circle each other like nervous horses, both too scared to make the first move." "There's nothing to move toward," Elena protested. "He bought me out of pity. I work for him. That's all this is." "Keep telling yourself that, if it helps you sleep at night." Clara began dishing up the flapjacks for the men's lunch. "But I've known that man for 15 years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Elena's heart did something complicated in her chest, a flutter that was equal parts hope and fear. She pressed her hand against her stomach, feeling nothing yet, but knowing life was growing there anyway. Even if that were true, which it's not, I'm carrying another man's child. What kind of man would want that? "The right kind," Clara said simply. "Now stop borrowing trouble and help me carry these plates out. The men are hungry enough to eat the table if we don't feed them soon." The ranch hands were a varied group, ranging from young Billy Summers, barely 17, to grizzled Tom Pritchard, who claimed to be 60 but looked older. They treated Elena with rough courtesy, tipping their hats, minding their language around her, offering awkward thanks for the meals she helped prepare. None of them asked about her past or how she'd come to be at Broken Creek. Out here, people's histories were their own business. Elena appreciated that more than they could know. But while the days brought routine and a measure of peace, the nights remained difficult. She still dreamed of Silas, of running through the dark, of hands grabbing at her. She woke gasping, her heart racing, certain for those first disoriented moments that she was back in the saloon, back in danger. Then reality would reassert itself. The small room, the solid walls, the distant sound of Clara's snoring from across the hall. Safe. She was safe. The morning sickness got worse before it got better. Some days, Elena could barely keep water down, let alone food. Clara made her ginger tea and forced her to eat dry toast, standing over her like a sergeant until Elena managed a few bites. On the worst days, when even the smell of cooking made her nauseated, Clara sent her to work outside, hanging laundry, tending the garden, anything away from the kitchen. It was during one of these garden sessions, 3 weeks after Elena had told Rhett about the baby, that he finally approached her directly. She was on her knees pulling weeds, her hands deep in the soil, when his shadow fell across her. Elena looked up, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun. "Miss Carver?" Rhett stood with his hat in his hands, turning it absently. "Got a moment?" Elena sat back on her heels, wiping her dirty hands on her apron. "Of course." He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. For a man so confident in every other aspect of his life, Rhett became almost boyish when trying to talk to her. "I've been thinking about your situation." Elena's stomach dropped. Here it came. The regret, the reconsideration, the realization that taking her in had been a mistake. "Yes? You've been sleeping in that room off the kitchen. It's small, and it's going to be too cold come winter. There's a larger room upstairs in the main house. Used to be my brother's Before. It's been empty for years. I'd like you to take it." Of all the things Elena had expected him to say, this wasn't it. "Mr. Mallory, I couldn't—" "You could, and you will," he interrupted, then softened his tone. "I'm not asking, Miss Carver. It's practical. You're going to have a baby. You'll need more space, more privacy. That room has a real window, better heating. It makes sense." Elena studied his face, looking for the real reason behind this offer. Was it pity, guilt, or something else, something neither of them was ready to name? "What will the men think?" she asked. "If I'm living in this main house, in your house, the men will think what I tell them to think, which is that I'm making a practical decision about where to house someone in your condition." His voice was firm. "And if any of them has a problem with it, they can take it up with me." The unspoken message was clear. No one would take it up with him. Rhett's authority on this ranch was absolute. "Then thank you," Elena said quietly. "I appreciate it." Rhett nodded, replacing his hat. He started to walk away, then paused. "Miss Carver?" "Elena." It was the first time he'd used her given name. "You don't have to keep thanking me for treating you like a human being. That should be the baseline, not something exceptional." He left before she could respond, striding across the yard toward the barn with that long-legged gait she'd come to recognize. Elena watched him go, her hands still buried in the earth, feeling something shift inside her that had nothing to do with the baby. Clara helped her move her meager possessions that evening. The room was exactly as Rhett had described, larger than the one off the kitchen, with a real bed frame and mattress, a wooden chest for clothes, a chair by the window. Simple, but clean and well-maintained. Someone had even left fresh linens on the bed and a quilt that looked handmade. "Clara, did you—" "Wasn't me," Clara said, smoothing the quilt. "That's Rhett's work. His mother made this quilt. He's kept it all these years, never used it. Means something, him giving it to you." Elena ran her hand over the fabric, a pattern of interlocking rings in blues and greens, the stitching tight and even. She thought of a woman she'd never met, sitting by lamplight, pulling needle through fabric, creating something beautiful and useful. Creating this. "I can't take this," Elena whispered. "You already have." Clara headed for the door. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's laundry day, and we've got twice the usual load." Alone in the room, Elena sat on the bed, feeling the mattress give beneath her weight. It was the nicest room she'd ever occupied. Through the window, she could see the sun setting over the distant hills, painting everything in shades of amber and rose. Cattle grazed in the near pasture. Birds called to each other as they settled for the night. It was beautiful in a stark, lonely way that matched something inside her. She lay back on the bed, pulling the quilt up to her chin, and allowed herself to imagine, just for a moment, that this could be permanent, that she could stay here, raise her child here, build a life in this place where people treated her like she mattered. It was dangerous, that kind of hoping. Hope made you vulnerable. Hope set you up for devastation when reality came crashing back in. But as Elena drifted towards sleep, wrapped in a dead woman's quilt in a room that had belonged to a dead boy, she couldn't quite stop herself from hoping anyway. The next morning brought the first real trouble Elena had faced since arriving at Broken Creek. She was hanging laundry when a rider approached the ranch. Not one of Rhett's men, someone new. He rode a flashy sorrel gelding and wore clothes too fine for ranch work, the kind of outfit that marked him as either very rich or very foolish. Elena watched from behind the flapping sheets as the man dismounted in the yard. Rhett emerged from the barn, his posture immediately wary. "Help you?" Rhett's voice carried across the distance. "Rhett Mallory?" The stranger's accent was Eastern, refined. "My name is William Ashford. I'm looking for a woman, Elena Carver. I was told she might be here." Elena froze, her hands clenching the wet sheet she'd been about to hang. How had anyone found her? Who was this man? She started to back away, thinking only of escape, but Clara's hand closed on her arm. "Stay," the older woman hissed. "Running makes you look guilty. Let Rhett handle this." In the yard, Rhett had crossed his arms. "Who's asking?" "I am. Mr. Ashford. I represent certain parties who have an interest in Miss Carver's whereabouts." "What kind of interest?" Ashford shifted, clearly not used to being questioned so directly. "Business interest, financial matters that need resolving. I assure you, Mr. Mallory, this is all perfectly legal and above board. If Miss Carver is here, I simply need to speak with her." "About what?" "That's between me and the lady." "Then I guess you'll be disappointed." Rhett's voice had gone flat, dangerous. "Because even if I did know where Elena Carver was, which I'm not saying I do, I wouldn't hand her over to some stranger who rides onto my property making vague threats about financial matters. I'm not threatening anyone. You're on my land asking about a woman, refusing to state your business clearly. Out here, we call that suspicious. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Ashford's pleasant demeanor cracked slightly. "Mr. Mallory, I don't think you understand. The people I represent have significant resources. If Miss Carver is here, they will find out. It would be better for everyone if you simply cooperated." "I'm going to stop you right there." Rhett took a step forward, and despite the fact that Ashford was mounted and Rhett was on foot, there was no question who held the power in this exchange. "I don't care who you represent or how many resources they have. This is my ranch. You're trespassing, and I'm telling you, politely, to get the hell off my property before I stop being polite." For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. Then Ashford yanked his horse's reins, turning the animal in a tight circle. "This isn't over, Mr. Mallory. Not by a long shot." "Yeah, it is." Rhett's hand rested casually on his hip near his pistol. "And if I see you on my land again without an invitation, we're going to have a different kind of conversation." Ashford rode off at a canter, dust rising behind his horse's hooves. Rhett watched until the man disappeared over the rise, then turned slowly, scanning the yard. His gaze found Elena behind the laundry line. "Miss Carver, a word." Elena's legs felt like water as she walked across the yard. Clara followed, a solid presence at her back. When they reached Rhett, his expression was unreadable. "You know who that was?" he asked. "No, I've never seen him before." "But you know what he wants." Elena nodded miserably. "Silas. It has to be. Maybe he realized he sold me too cheap. Maybe he wants to renegotiate, or maybe the men who originally bought you are trying to collect what they think they paid for," Rhett finished. "Either way, this is a problem." "I'll leave." The words tumbled out before Elena could stop them. "I'll go tonight. You'll do no such thing." Rhett's voice was sharp. "Running just makes you vulnerable. Here, you've got walls and men and someone willing to stand between you and whoever comes looking." "I'm endangering you," Elena protested. "Endangering the ranch." "I can handle William Ashford and anyone else who wants to cause trouble." Rhett looked at Clara. "Increase security. I want men watching the road at all times. Anyone approaches the ranch who isn't recognized, I want to know about it immediately." "Done," Clara said. "And Elena." He turned back to her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "You're staying. I don't care who comes looking or what they think they're owed. You're under my protection now. That means something." Elena wanted to argue, to insist that she wasn't worth the trouble, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she managed only a whispered, "Thank you." "Stop thanking me," Rhett said, but his voice had gentled. "Just be careful. Don't go anywhere alone. If you see anything unusual, anyone you don't recognize, you tell me immediately. Understood?" Elena nodded. "Good." Rhett glanced at Clara. "Keep her close, and armed if possible." "Armed?" Elena repeated. "Just a precaution." But Rhett's face said it was more than that. "This is the frontier, Miss Carver. Out here, being able to defend yourself isn't optional. It's survival." That afternoon, Clara taught Elena how to load and fire a small pistol. A lady's gun, Clara called it, though there was nothing delicate about the kick when Elena pulled the trigger. She practiced until her hands shook and her ears rang, until Clara was satisfied she could at least point it in the right direction and pull the trigger without flinching. "Don't pull it unless you mean to use it," Clara warned. "And if you do pull it, Don't hesitate. Hesitation gets you killed. Elena tucked the pistol into her apron pocket, feeling the weight of it against her hip. She'd never wanted to be the kind of person who carried a weapon, but she'd also never wanted to be the kind of person who got sold by her own brother, and life rarely cared what you wanted. The days following Ashford's visit were tense. The ranch hands kept rifles close while they worked. Rhett barely slept, Elena knew, because she heard him moving around the house at odd hours, checking doors and windows. She wanted to tell him this was all unnecessary, that she wasn't worth this level of protection, but every time she tried, the words died in her throat. Because maybe, just maybe, she was starting to believe she might be worth it after all. 2 weeks passed with no sign of Ashford or anyone else. Slowly, the tension eased. The men stopped carrying rifles everywhere. Rhett began sleeping regular hours again. Life returned to its rhythm: wake, work, eat, sleep, repeat. Elena's pregnancy became more obvious. Her dresses no longer fit properly, the fabric straining across her growing belly. Clara took her into town to buy fabric for new clothes, a trip that made Elena nervous but passed without incident. The town's general store owner, a severe-looking woman named Mrs. Patterson, took Elena's measurements without comment, her face professionally neutral. "That'll be ready in a week," Mrs. Patterson said, wrapping the fabric. "You're at the Mallory place?" "Yes, ma'am." Something flickered across the woman's face. Surprise, maybe, or assessment. "Rhett Mallory's a good man, hard but fair. You've landed in a decent place, girl." It wasn't quite approval, but it wasn't condemnation either. In a small town where gossip traveled faster than horses, Elena would take what she could get. As summer deepened into its full heat, the ranch work intensified. Pine season came, and everyone, including Elena, worked from dawn to dusk, racing to get the hay cut, dried and baled before the weather turned. Elena couldn't do the heavy lifting anymore, but she could rake, could help stack, could bring water and food to the men in the fields. It was during one of these water runs that Elena finally had a real conversation with Rhett, the first one that went beyond polite pleasantries or practical instructions. She found him in the south field, shirtless in the brutal heat, swinging a scythe with the steady rhythm of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. His back was to her, muscles shifting under sun-browned skin with each stroke. Elena called his name, and he turned, lowering the scythe. "Water?" she offered, holding out the canteen. Rhett took it gratefully, drinking deep. Water ran down his chin, dripped onto his chest. Elena found herself staring and forced her eyes away, feeling her face heat in a way that had nothing to do with the sun. "You shouldn't be out here," Rhett said, handing back the canteen. "It's too hot. Clara can bring water." "Clara's busy with lunch. I'm fine." "You're pregnant. You should be resting." "I'm pregnant, not an invalid." Elena surprised herself with the sharpness in her voice. "I can still work. I need to work. Sitting around makes me feel useless." Rhett studied her, something like understanding in his expression. "You don't like being taken care of." "I'm not used to it," Elena admitted. "My whole life I've had to earn my place, prove my worth. I don't know how to just exist without justifying it." "Maybe that's something you should learn." Rhett picked up his shirt from where he had draped it over a fence post, pulling it on. "Not everything has to be earned, Elena. Some things are just given freely because they should be." "Like what?" "Like safety, like respect, like basic human dignity." He met her eyes. "Like a place to live that's not contingent on you working yourself into the ground." Elena shook her head. "I'm not a charity case." "I didn't say you were. You work hard. Everyone can see that. But there's a difference between contributing and feeling like you have to justify your existence every single day." His voice gentled. "You're allowed to just be here, Elena. You don't have to earn it." The words hit something deep inside her, something she hadn't known was wounded until he touched it. Elena felt tears prick at her eyes and blinked them back furiously. She would not cry, not here, not now, not in front of him. "Thank you," she managed. Rhett sighed. "What did I say about thanking me?" "I know, but no buts. Now go back to the house before you collapse from heat stroke, and that's an order from your employer, not a request from a friend." "Friend." The words settled between them, surprising and warm. Elena nodded, turning to head back toward the house. She'd made it perhaps 10 steps when Rhett called her name again. Elena? She turned back. Yes? For what it's worth. He hesitated, then continued. I'm glad you're here. I know the circumstances were complicated, but I'm glad. Elena's heart did that complicated flutter again. Hope and fear tangled together so tightly she couldn't separate them. I'm glad too, she said softly. They stood there in the summer heat, 20 feet of hayfield between them, neither moving. Then one of the other ranch hands called for Rhett, breaking the moment. He raised a hand in acknowledgement, giving Elena one last nod before returning to his work. Elena walked back to the house in a daze, barely noticing the heat or the weight of the empty canteens. Clara took one look at her face when she entered the kitchen and smiled knowingly but said nothing. Some things didn't need words. That night, Elena lay in her room, her real room now, the one that felt like it might actually belong to her, and thought about what Rhett had said, about being allowed to just exist, about not having to earn basic dignity. It was a radical concept for someone who'd spent her whole life being told she was a burden, a problem to be solved or gotten rid of. Could she learn that? Could she unlearn 18 years of conditioning that said her worth was tied directly to her usefulness? Maybe. With time. With people like Rhett and Clara showing her day after day that there was another way to be in the world. Her hand drifted to her stomach, feeling the small swell there. Soon there would be another person in this equation, a tiny human who would depend on her completely. What kind of mother did she want to be? The kind who taught her child they had to earn love? Or the kind who gave it freely, unconditionally, the way she was slowly learning it could be given? The baby kicked. Just a flutter, so faint she might have imagined it. But no, there it was again, real, present, demanding to be acknowledged. Hello, Elena whispered to her belly. I feel you. I know you're there. Another kick, stronger this time. Elena laughed, the sound surprising her. When was the last time she'd laughed with pure joy? She couldn't remember. A soft knock on her door. Elena, you all right? Clara's voice concerned. I'm fine. The baby kicked. I felt it for the first time. The door opened and Clara came in, still in her nightgown, her hair in a long braid down her back. She sat on the edge of Elena's bed, her hand joining Elena's on her belly. That's a strong one, Clara said when the baby kicked again. Going to be a fighter, this one. Like its mother? Elena said, only half joking. Exactly like its mother. Clara's voice was firm. You've survived things that would have broken other people, Elena Carver. Don't ever forget that. After Clara left, Elena lay in the dark, feeling her baby move, and allowed herself to imagine a future. Not just survival, but actual life. Her child growing up here, running through these fields, learning to ride horses, being taught by Rhett and Clara and the ranch hands, being safe, being loved, being home. It was the most dangerous kind of dreaming, but for the first time in her life, Elena let herself dream it anyway. The announcement came at breakfast 3 weeks later, delivered with Rhett's typical directness as he stood at the head of the long dining table while his men shoveled eggs and bacon into their mouths. I'm taking the cattle to market in Kansas, Rhett said, his voice cutting through the morning chatter. Leaving in 4 days. Tom, Billy, and Jack, you're coming with me. Rest of you stay here. Keep the ranch running. We'll be gone 6 weeks, maybe 8, depending on weather and how fast we can move the herd. 6 weeks. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. She stood frozen by the kitchen door, the coffee pot heavy in her hands, trying to process what she'd just heard. 6 weeks without Rhett. 6 weeks of him gone, riding dangerous trails, facing who knew what hazards. 6 weeks of her alone here. Well, not alone, but without him. When had his presence become so essential to her sense of safety? When had she started looking for him first thing every morning, tracking his movements across the yard throughout the day? When had the sound of his voice become the thing that told her everything would be all right? She didn't have answers to those questions, and that terrified her almost as much as his leaving. Clara noticed her distress immediately. After breakfast, when the men had filed out to begin their day's work, the older woman cornered Elena in the kitchen. You've got that look on your face, Clara said, scrubbing at a particularly stubborn pan. What look? The one that says you're about to do something foolish, like run away or work yourself sick or convince yourself you're not allowed to feel what you're feeling. Elena set down the dish she'd been drying with more force than necessary. I don't know what you're talking about. He's been here every day since you arrived, Clara said gently. Standing between you and trouble. Of course you're scared of him leaving. That's natural. I'm not. Elena stopped, frustrated with herself. It doesn't matter what I feel. He has a ranch to run. Cattle don't sell themselves. This is his livelihood. Doesn't mean you can't be scared. Doesn't mean you can't tell him that. Tell him what? That I'm pathetic and dependent and can't handle 6 weeks without him hovering over me? Elena's voice rose despite her best efforts to control it. That'll make him feel great about leaving, won't it? Clara dried her hands on her apron and turned to face Elena fully. You could tell him the truth, that you've come to care about him, that you'll miss him, that you're worried about him facing danger on the trail. I can't. The words came out as barely a whisper. Why not? Because saying it out loud would make it real, because caring about someone gave them power to hurt you. Because Elena had spent so long building walls around her heart that she didn't know how to dismantle them, even for someone who'd proven himself worthy of trust. Because I'm carrying another man's child, Elena said instead, the easy excuse, the obvious barrier. Because Rhett bought me like livestock. Because whatever kindness he's shown me is exactly that. Kindness, not... She couldn't finish the sentence. Not love? Clara supplied quietly. Elena flinched. Don't. Why? Because the word scares you? Because you might want it? Clara's voice was maddeningly calm. Elena, I've watched you and Rhett circle each other for months now. The way he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching. The way you light up when he walks into a room. You think I'm blind? What he feels or doesn't feel doesn't matter. The situation is what it is. The situation, Clara said slowly, is that a good man cares about you and you care about him, but you're both too stubborn or scared to do anything about it. That's the situation. Before Elena could respond, the kitchen door swung open and Rhett himself appeared, hat in hand, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Miss Carver, Elena, could I speak with you? Outside? Clara gave Elena a pointed look that said everything without words. Elena wanted to refuse, to claim she was too busy with dishes, but that would be cowardly. She dried her hands and followed Rhett out into the morning sunshine. He led her to the garden, now lush with summer growth. Tomatoes ripening on vines, beans climbing their poles, squash spreading its broad leaves across the earth Elena had helped prepare months ago. The garden had become her sanctuary, the place she went when her thoughts grew too loud or her fears too sharp. Rhett stopped by the fence, staring out at the distant pastures where cattle grazed, dark shapes against golden grass. For a long moment he didn't speak. I need you to understand something, he finally said, his voice low. This cattle drive, it's not optional. The money from selling the herd is what keeps this ranch running through winter, pays the men, buys supplies, covers debts. I have to go. I know that, Elena said. You don't need to explain your business decisions to me. That's not... He stopped, frustrated, and tried again. I'm not explaining because I think you'll object. I'm explaining because I need you to know I wouldn't leave unless I had to. Not with Ashford potentially still out there. Not with you, He gestured vaguely at her rounded belly, now clearly visible under her dress. Not with me being pregnant and useless, Elena finished bitterly. That's not what I was going to say. Rhett turned to face her directly. You're not useless, Elena. You're the opposite of useless. You've made this place better just by being here. The house feels more like a home. The men are happier. Clara smiles more. And He stopped again, something struggling in his expression. You what? Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. I look forward to coming back at the end of the day, he said quietly. Because you're here. Because seeing you means the day is almost done and I can just be. For a little while. Does that make sense? It made too much sense. It was exactly how Elena felt about seeing him, like the world became a little less harsh, a little more manageable, just by virtue of him being in it. Yes, she whispered. It makes sense. Rhett nodded, seeming relieved. Good. Because I need you to understand, this drive is temporary. I'm coming back. And while I'm gone, Clara will be here. So will Pete and Marcus and the others. You'll be protected. I'm not worried about me, Elena said, and realized as she said it that it was true. I'm worried about you. Those drives are dangerous. Stampedes, river crossings, raiders, weather. I've done this a dozen times. I know what I'm doing. So did my father, and he died anyway. The words came out harsher than Elena intended. Sorry, 6 weeks is a long time. Something shifted in Rhett's expression. Surprise, maybe, or pleasure at her concern. It'll go faster than you think. By the time I'm back, it'll almost be time for... He glanced at her belly. For the baby, Elena finished. Yes, Clara thinks late October, early November. And you'll be all right, handling that without me here? The question was so earnest, so genuinely concerned, that Elena felt something crack in her chest. When had anyone ever cared whether she'd be all right? When had her well-being mattered to anyone but herself? I'll be fine, she said, trying to sound confident. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. Clara knows what to do, and you'll be back before it happens. I'll try to be. But Rhett's voice said he couldn't guarantee it, and they both knew it. Weather, accidents, any number of things could delay him. Elena, if something happens, if the baby comes early, or if there are complications, then Clara will handle it, Elena interrupted, not wanting to think about worst-case scenarios. Stop worrying. You have enough to think about with the cattle drive. Rhett reached out as if to touch her arm, then seemed to think better of it, his hand falling back to his side. I want you to promise me something. What? That you'll be careful, that you won't take unnecessary risks, that if anyone suspicious shows up, Ashford or anyone else, you'll hide and let the men handle it. I'm not a child. I know you're not. I know you're strong and capable and brave as hell. His voice was fierce now. But I also know you tend to think you have to handle everything alone. You don't. Not anymore. So promise me you'll let people help you. Elena wanted to argue, to insist she didn't need help, but that would be a lie, and Rhett deserved better than lies. I promise, she said softly. Good. He nodded once, decisively, as if something had been settled. I'll leave extra money with Clara, just in case. And I'll write when I can, let you know where we are and when we expect to be back. You don't have to. I want to. He met her eyes, and the intensity in his gaze made Elena's breath catch. I want you to know I'm thinking about you, about this place, about getting back to... He trailed off, not finishing the sentence, but Elena heard the unspoken word anyway. Home. Getting back home. When had Broken Creek become home for him too? Or had it always been, and she was just now seeing it through his eyes, not just a ranch, not just a business, but a place worth returning to, worth protecting, worth fighting for. Be safe, Elena said, her voice thick with emotions she didn't dare name. Please. Always am. Rhett gave her one of his rare smiles, small, slightly crooked, but genuine. Take care of yourself, Elena Carver, and that baby of yours. He walked away before she could respond, leaving Elena standing in the garden with the sun on her face and tears threatening to spill over. She pressed her hands against her belly, feeling the baby move in response to her racing heart. He's coming back, she whispered to her unborn child. He promised. He keeps his promises. She just had to believe that, had to hold on to it through however many long weeks stretched ahead. The next 4 days passed in a blur of preparation. The men selected which cattle to drive, separating them into a manageable herd. Supplies were packed: food, bedrolls, medical supplies, ammunition. Rhett went over the books with Clara, making sure she knew where everything stood financially. He spent hours with Pete, the most senior of the ranch hands, staying behind, going over repairs that needed doing, problems that might arise, contingencies for every scenario. Elena threw herself into work, trying not to think about the approaching departure. She helped Clara preserve vegetables from the garden, knowing they'd need food stores for winter. She mended clothes until her fingers ached. She cleaned things that didn't need cleaning, organized things that were already organized, anything to keep her hands busy and her mind occupied. But at night, Alone in her room, the fear crept in. What if something happened to Rhett on the drive? What if he didn't come back? What if the last time she saw him was just another ordinary goodbye and she never got the chance to tell him? Tell him what? That she cared about him? That somewhere along the way, between the night he'd bought her freedom and now she'd developed feelings she had no right to feel? That when she imagined her future, he was in it, not as employer or protector, but as something more? Elena pressed her face into her pillow, muffling the sob that threatened to escape. This was foolish. She was being foolish. Rhett had been clear about what this arrangement was: sanctuary, employment, protection. He'd never promised anything more, never suggested he wanted anything more. The fact that he was kind to her, that he seemed to care about her well-being, didn't mean he felt anything beyond basic human decency toward someone under his protection. And yet, the way he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she wasn't paying attention, the quilt he'd given her, his mother's quilt, something precious, the room he'd insisted she take, the way his voice softened when he said her name. Was Clara right? Was there something more than kindness in Rhett's actions? Or was Elena just desperate enough to see romance where none existed? She didn't know. And now he was leaving, and she'd have 6 weeks to agonize over questions that might not have answers. The morning of the departure arrived too quickly. Elena woke before dawn to the sound of men loading supplies, horses being saddled, cattle lowing as they were gathered for the drive. She dressed quickly and went to help Clara prepare breakfast, one last real meal before the men faced weeks of trail food. The mood in the dining room was boisterous, the men excited about the adventure ahead. Even Rhett seemed more relaxed than usual, joking with Billy about the young man's first cattle drive. Only Tom Pritchard remained serious, checking and rechecking his gear with the methodical focus of someone who'd seen enough drives to know how quickly things could go wrong. Elena served the food silently, trying to memorize the scene. Rhett at the head of the table, his face animated as he talked about the route they'd take, the towns they'd pass through. His hair was slightly too long, curling at his collar. He needed a shave. There was a small scar on his jaw she'd never noticed before, a thin white line against his tanned skin. She was staring. She knew she was staring, but she couldn't seem to stop, couldn't seem to do anything but drink in the sight of him while she still could. Rhett's eyes found hers across the room. He smiled, a small, private smile just for her, and something in Elena's chest loosened slightly. He was real. This was real. Whatever happened, whatever came next, this moment existed. After breakfast, the men moved outside to make final preparations. Elena cleaned up mechanically, barely aware of what she was doing. Clara worked beside her in unusual silence, giving Elena space to process whatever she was feeling. Through the window, Elena watched Rhett check the horses one last time, adjust the packs on the supply wagon, give final instructions to Pete. He moved with confidence, completely in his element. This was what he was born to do: lead, organize, take care of people and animals and land. Elena could see why his men respected him so completely. He earned that respect with every action, every decision, every moment of competent leadership. "You should go say goodbye," Clara said quietly. "I did, this morning." "You should say it again, properly." Elena set down the dish she'd been washing. Clara was right. She'd regret it forever if she let him leave without what? She still didn't know what she wanted to say. Only that saying nothing felt wrong. She found Rhett by the barn, tightening his saddle's girth one final time. His bay gelding stood patiently, used to these preparations. When Rhett saw Elena approaching, he straightened, his hand stilling on the leather. "Elena, everything all right?" "I wanted to—" She stopped, searching for words. "I wanted to wish you safe travels." Again. Properly. Something flickered across Rhett's face. Understanding, maybe, or affection. "Thank you. I appreciate that." They stood there awkwardly, two people who'd shared a home for months but had never quite figured out how to bridge the careful distance between them. Elena wanted to step closer, to do something, say something, but fear and propriety held her frozen. "Take care of yourself," Rhett said finally. "And listen to Clara. She's been running this ranch as long as I have, knows what she's doing." "I will." "And Elena?" He hesitated, then continued. "Write down anything important that happens. Things you want to tell me. I'll want to hear it all when I get back. The implication was clear. He'd want to hear about the baby's development, about her pregnancy, about her. He was asking her to share her life with him, even from a distance. The realization made Elena's heart stutter. "I'll do that," she managed. Rhett nodded, then surprised her by reaching out and taking her hand. His palm was rough, calloused from years of hard work, but his grip was gentle. "I'm coming back, Elena. I promise you that. No matter what happens on this drive, I'm coming home." Home. There was that word again. "I'll be here," Elena whispered. "We'll be here." She placed her free hand on her belly, making the promise clear, she and the baby both, waiting. Rhett's eyes followed the gesture, something unreadable in his expression. For a moment, Elena thought he might say something more, might cross the invisible line they'd both been towing for months. But then Tom called his name, and the moment shattered. "I have to go," Rhett said, releasing her hand. 6 weeks, 8 at most." "I know." He mounted his horse in one smooth motion, settling into the saddle with the ease of someone who'd spent half his life on horseback. The other riders were already mounted, waiting. The cattle were gathered, restless and ready to move. Everything was prepared. Rhett looked down at Elena one last time. "Take care," he said softly. Then louder, to his men, "Let's move out." The drive began, cattle flowing like a river of dark bodies across the grassland, the riders flanking them to keep the herd together. Elena watched from the yard, Clara beside her, as the group moved farther and farther away. Rhett rode at the head, straight-backed and confident, leading his men and cattle toward distant markets and unknown dangers. Elena watched until they disappeared over the horizon, until even the dust cloud raised by hundreds of hooves had settled. Only then did she turn back to the house, her hand pressed against her belly, feeling the baby move inside her. 6 weeks. She could survive 6 weeks. She'd survived much worse. But as the days began to pass, Elena discovered that surviving and living were two different things. The ranch felt wrong without Rhett. Too quiet, too empty, like a stage set missing its lead actor. She went through the motions of her work, helped Clara with meals and laundry and all the endless tasks that kept a ranch running. But her heart wasn't in it. Her heart was somewhere on a trail heading toward Kansas, with a man who'd promised to come home. Pete and the other remaining ranch hands were competent and kind, but they weren't Rhett. They didn't have his quiet authority, his way of making problems seem manageable just by his presence. Marcus, the youngest of those who'd stayed behind, tried to fill the gap, taking on more responsibility than he was probably ready for. Elena appreciated his efforts even as she recognized they were inadequate substitutes. The first week was the hardest. Elena found herself looking for Rhett constantly, expecting to see him in the barn, in the yard, at the head of the dinner table. Every time she turned a corner, part of her anticipated his presence, and every time he wasn't there, the disappointment felt fresh. "This is ridiculous," she told Clara one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "I'm acting like a lovesick girl." "You're acting like a woman who misses someone she cares about," Clara corrected. "Nothing ridiculous about that." "I barely know him." "You know him well enough." Clara's rocking chair creaked rhythmically. "Besides, knowing someone isn't just about time. It's about seeing who they are when it matters. You've seen Rhett at his best and probably at his worst, too. That counts for something." Elena supposed that was true. She'd seen Rhett angry, frustrated, exhausted, worried. She'd seen him gentle with animals, patient with young Billy, firm but fair with the other men. She'd seen him step between her and danger without hesitation. She'd seen him give her his mother's quilt and his brother's room and ask for nothing in return. Maybe she did know him. Maybe better than she'd realized. The second week brought Elena's first letter from Rhett, a single page delivered by a rider heading back from the trail. The handwriting was messy, clearly written by firelight or in stolen moments, but Elena treasured every word. "Made it to the Platte River crossing without incident. Lost 1 cow to a snake bite, but otherwise the herd is healthy. Weather has been good. Billy is learning fast, though he fell off his horse twice the first day. Tom sends his regards. Hope you are well. Hope the baby is well. Will write again from Fort Kearney. R. Mallory." Elena read the letter so many times she could recite it from memory. She traced the letters with her finger, imagining Rhett's hand forming them, thinking of her as he wrote. He'd asked about the baby, sent it through Tom. Small things, but they meant everything. She sat down that evening and wrote her own letter, filling it with details about the ranch, the mare that had finally foaled, the repairs Pete had completed on the barn roof, the garden's yield, and more personal things too, how the baby kicked stronger every day, how she'd felt its hiccups for the first time, how she'd started talking to it in the evenings, telling it stories about the ranch it would be born into. She sealed the letter and gave it to the next rider heading toward the trail, trusting it would find its way to Rhett somehow. It felt good, maintaining this tenuous connection across miles of prairie and plains, like a lifeline tethering her to something solid while everything else felt uncertain. The third week brought complications. Elena woke one morning to find blood spotting her undergarments. Not much, but enough to send terror shooting through her. She found Clara immediately, trying to keep the panic from her voice and failing. Clara examined her quickly, her face serious. It's probably nothing. Some spotting is normal, especially this far along. But you're going to rest for the next few days, no arguments, bed rest, minimal activity. We're not taking chances. But the work? We'll get done without you. Marcus can help me in the kitchen. The men can fend for themselves for a few days. Your job right now is to stay horizontal and keep that baby cooking. Understood? Elena nodded, too scared to argue. Clara helped her back to bed, propping her up with pillows, bringing her water and dry toast. The bleeding stopped by afternoon, and the baby continued to move normally, but Clara insisted on keeping Elena in bed for 3 full days just to be safe. Those 3 days were torment. Elena wasn't used to idleness, wasn't comfortable being waited on. But more than that, she was terrified. What if something was wrong? What if she lost the baby? For months now, she'd been ambivalent about the pregnancy, a reminder of trauma, a complication in an already complicated life. But now, faced with the possibility of losing it, Elena realized how much she wanted this child, how much she'd already come to love the tiny life growing inside her. Please, she whispered to her belly on the second night of bed rest. Please stay. Please be all right. I promise I'll take care of you. I promise I'll be a good mother. Just please stay. The baby kicked in response, a strong, reassuring thump against her palm. Elena cried then, tears of relief and fear and overwhelming emotion she couldn't name. She'd been holding so much inside for so long, and now it all came pouring out. Grief for her mother, anger at her father and Silas, fear about the future, loneliness for Rhett, love for this unborn child she'd never planned but desperately wanted. Clara found her like that, sobbing into her pillow in the darkened room. The older woman sat on the edge of the bed and gathered Elena against her chest, holding her the way Elena's own mother used to when nightmares woke her as a child. Let it out, Clara murmured. You've been so strong for so long. It's all right to break a little. I've got you. So Elena broke, and Clara held her through it, solid and unshakable, the mother figure Elena hadn't realized she'd been desperately needing. When the storm finally passed, leaving Elena wrung out and exhausted, Clara tucked the quilts around her and sat in the chair by the window, keeping watch through the night like a guardian angel. By the 4th week, Elena was back on her feet and the ranch had settled into a new rhythm. She and Clara worked together efficiently, the 2 women running the household with minimal help from the men. Pete handled the outdoor work competently, and Marcus proved surprisingly good at cooking, or at least at following Clara's instructions closely enough to produce edible results. But Elena's body was changing rapidly now, growing larger and more unwieldy by the day. Tasks that had been easy a month ago now left her breathless. Her back ached constantly. Her ankles swelled in the evening heat, and always she thought about Rhett. Wondered where he was, whether he was safe, whether he thought about her as much as she thought about him. Another letter arrived in the 4th week, this one longer. Fort Kearney was busy, lots of traffic heading west. Prices for beef are good, should make a decent profit. Billy got in a fight with a card sharp who accused him of cheating. He wasn't. The other man was just a sore loser. I had to smooth things over before it turned into something worse. Made me think about your brother, about men who prey on those weaker than themselves. I'm glad you're not there anymore. Glad you're at the ranch where people will treat you right. Tom says I'm getting soft, spending all this time worrying about home instead of focusing on the drive. Maybe he's right, but I can't seem to help it. I hope you're well. I hope you're eating enough and resting when you need to. I hope you're happy, or at least as happy as circumstances allow. The drive should be done in another month, then 10 days back, maybe less if we push hard. I'll see you soon. R. Elena read that letter until she knew every word, every crossed-out mistake, every moment where his pen had hesitated. He was worried about her. He thought about her. He wanted her to be happy, and he was coming home soon. 1 more month. She could survive 1 more month, but Elena didn't get 1 more month. The pain started on a cold October evening during the 7th week of Rhett's absence. Elena had been helping Clara prepare dinner when the first contraction hit, a deep, pulling sensation that made her gasp and grip the edge of the table. Clara took one look at her face and set down the knife she'd been using to chop vegetables. How far apart? Clara asked calmly. That was the first one. I think. Elena tried to breathe through the fading pain. Maybe it's just... Another contraction cut off her words, stronger this time, radiating from her lower back around to her belly. Clara pulled out the pocket watch she kept in her apron and noted the time. We need to get you upstairs, Clara said. Marcus, Pete, I need you both now. The men came running, fear on their faces at Clara's urgent tone. Pete, who'd been through his wife's 3 deliveries, understood immediately. He and Marcus helped Elena up the stairs to her room, while Clara rushed around gathering supplies. Clean linens, hot water, the medical kit Rhett kept for emergencies. It's too early, Elena gasped as another contraction seized her. The baby's not due for another 3 weeks at least. Clara, it's too early. Sometimes babies come when they want to come, Clara said, helping Elena into a nightgown with Marcus and Pete tactfully looking away. Could be your dates were off. Could be the baby's just eager. Either way, it's happening. Pete, send Marcus to fetch Mrs. Patterson from town. We need the midwife. That's a 2-hour ride there and back, Pete said. Then he better ride fast. Go. Marcus thundered down the stairs, and moments later, Elena heard hoofbeats fading into the distance. Clara settled her into bed, propping pillows behind her back, smoothing the hair from her sweating forehead. You're going to be fine, Clara said firmly. I've helped birth more calves and foals than I can count, and 3 human babies besides. This isn't my first time. But what if something goes wrong? Elena's voice cracked. What if the baby? What if I... Nothing's going wrong. You're young and healthy and strong. This baby's been kicking like a mule for months, which means it's strong too. We're going to get through this together. The contractions came faster, harder, each one building on the last until Elena couldn't tell where one ended and the next began. Time became meaningless. She was aware only of pain and Clara's steady presence, the older woman's hand supporting her, wiping her face with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement. That's it. Breathe through it. Don't fight the pain. Let it do its work. Your body knows what to do. But Elena's body felt like it was tearing apart. She'd imagined childbirth would hurt, but nothing had prepared her for this. This overwhelming, consuming agony that seemed to have no end. She screamed, not caring who heard, not caring about anything except surviving the next wave of pain. Somewhere in the haze of agony, Mrs. Patterson arrived. The stern woman from the general store, transformed now into someone competent and commanding. She examined Elena quickly, her face giving nothing away. She's progressing normally, Mrs. Patterson told Clara, but it's going to be a while yet. First babies take their time. Hours blurred together. Night fell, turning the window black. Lamplight flickered across the ceiling. Elena existed in a world of pain and effort, pushing when they told her to push, breathing when they told her to breathe, enduring because there was no other choice. I can't, she sobbed at one point, exhausted beyond anything she'd ever known. I can't do this anymore. I can't. You can, and you will, Clara said fiercely. You're the strongest person I know, Elena Carver. You survived your brother selling you. You survived getting dragged halfway across the territory. You survived building a new life from nothing. You can survive this. This baby needs you to survive this. The baby. Her baby. The tiny person she'd been talking to for months, feeling kick and hiccup and move. Elena gathered what remained of her strength and pushed, and pushed, and pushed, until finally, A sound split the air that wasn't her own screaming. A baby's cry, thin and angry and absolutely perfect. "It's a boy," Mrs. Patterson announced, holding up a tiny red-faced infant who was clearly furious about being born. "Small but healthy. Good lungs on him." Elena collapsed back against the pillows, tears streaming down her face as Mrs. Patterson cleaned the baby and wrapped him in soft blankets. Then the midwife placed him in Elena's arms, and the world stopped. He was perfect, impossibly, miraculously perfect. Tiny fists waving, mouth open in outrage, eyes scrunched shut, dark hair plastered to his head. He weighed almost nothing, felt as fragile as spun glass, but he was real. He was hers. "Hello," Elena whispered, touching one finger to his cheek. "Hello, baby. I'm your mama. I've been waiting to meet you." The baby's crying stopped. His eyes opened, dark blue, unfocused, but searching. He looked at her, and Elena felt something in her chest crack wide open. This was love. Pure, uncomplicated, fierce love, unlike anything she'd ever experienced. "What will you name him?" Clara asked softly, standing beside the bed with tears in her own eyes. Elena hadn't thought about names, hadn't let herself think that far ahead, as if naming the baby would make the pregnancy too real, would give her too much to lose. But now, looking at her son, the name came to her with absolute certainty. "Micah," she said. "His name is Micah." It meant, "Who is like God?" A prayer for protection, a hope for grace. Her mother had loved biblical names, had told Elena once that names carried power, shaped destinies. "Let this child be protected," Elena prayed silently. "Let him be loved. Let him have all the things I never had." Mrs. Patterson stayed through the night, making sure both Elena and the baby were stable. By morning, she pronounced them both healthy and prepared to leave. "You did well," the midwife told Elena, packing her supplies. "The boy's small, but not dangerously so. Feed him often, keep him warm, and he should thrive. You'll be sore for a few days, tired for longer. Let Clara do the heavy work. Your job now is to rest and care for that baby." After she left, Clara brought Elena breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast that tasted like heaven after the ordeal of birth. Micah slept in the crook of Elena's arm, his tiny body warm against hers, his breathing soft and even. "He's beautiful," Clara said, sitting in the chair by the window. "Going to be a heartbreaker when he grows up, mark my words." "He's going to be safe," Elena said fiercely, "and loved, and he's never going to wonder if he's wanted. I'm going to make sure of that." "I know you will," Clara smiled. "You're going to be a wonderful mother, Elena. I've known that since the day you got here." Elena looked down at her son, at this tiny person who depended on her completely and felt the weight of that responsibility settle over her like a cloak. She'd spent so long being the one who needed protecting, who needed saving, but now she was the protector, the savior, the one who stood between this innocent life and all the dangers of the world. It was terrifying. It was perfect. It was exactly what she needed. The next few days passed in a blur of feeding and diaper changes and exhaustion, unlike anything Elena had experienced. Micah woke every 2 hours wanting to nurse, his cries thin but insistent. Elena's body ached from the birth. Her breasts were sore, and she felt like she hadn't slept in a year. But every time she looked at her son, every time he wrapped his tiny fingers around hers, the exhaustion seemed bearable. Clara helped enormously, taking Micah for short periods so Elena could rest, handling all the household tasks Elena couldn't manage. The ranch hands kept their distance, respectful of the new mother's need for privacy, but she caught them peeking at the baby when they thought she wasn't looking. Even gruff Pete had a soft smile for little Micah. But through it all, Elena thought about Rhett. He should be here. He should be seeing this baby, this new life. She wanted to show Micah to him, wanted to see Rhett's expression when he held the infant for the first time. Would he smile? Would he see Micah as Elena did? A miracle, a gift, a reason to hope? Or would he see only a reminder that Elena had belonged to another man first? That Micah's father was some nameless gambler who'd taken what Silas offered and moved on without a thought? The doubts crept in during the long nights when she sat alone nursing Micah, the house silent around her. Rhett had been kind, protective, even affectionate in his restrained way. But that was before the baby. Before the reality of another man's child made everything more complicated. What if Rhett came home and realized he didn't want this? Didn't want a ready-made family, a woman with a child who would always be a reminder that she wasn't untouched. Wasn't his alone? Elena pressed her face against Micah's soft hair and tried not to think about it, tried to focus on the present. This moment, this baby, this blessing she'd been given despite everything. 2 weeks after Micah's birth, a rider appeared on the horizon. Elena was in the rocking chair by her window, Micah asleep in her arms, when she saw the dust cloud approaching. Her heart leaped. Could it be? Was Rhett back early? But as the rider got closer, Elena's hope curdled into fear. This wasn't Rhett's confident posture, wasn't his bay gelding. This was someone else, and given their history with unexpected visitors, that likely meant trouble. She heard Pete calling for Clara, heard the ranch hands moving into defensive positions. Elena stood carefully, placing Micah in his cradle, a beautiful piece of furniture Pete had built in secret and presented the day after the birth, and went to the window. The rider pulled up in the yard, and Elena's blood ran cold. William Ashford, the man who'd come looking for her months ago, asking questions on behalf of people Silas owed. He looked worse than last time, harder, meaner, like the intervening months had stripped away any pretense of civility. Clara appeared in Elena's doorway. "Stay up here," she ordered. "Don't come down no matter what you hear. Pete and the boys will handle this." "Clara, what if—" "Stay up here." Clara's voice was iron. "You've got a baby to protect now. That changes everything. Stay quiet and stay hidden." Clara left, closing the door firmly behind her. Elena heard her descend the stairs, heard the front door open. She crept to her window, careful to stay hidden behind the curtain, and watched the scene unfold below. Pete stood in the center of the yard, rifle held casually but ready. Marcus and the other ranch hands flanked him, similarly armed. Clara emerged from the house and took up position on the porch, her shotgun, a weapon Elena had never seen her carry, cradled competently in her arms. "You're not welcome here," Pete called to Ashford. "Mr. Mallory made that clear last time. I suggest you ride on." Ashford dismounted, his hands carefully visible to show he wasn't reaching for weapons. "I'm not looking for trouble. I'm just here to collect what's owed." "Nothing's owed to you or whoever you work for," Clara said coldly. "Now get off this property before we make you get off." The woman, Elena Carver, she represents a debt unpaid. Her brother sold her to certain parties. Those parties paid good money. They're entitled to collect their purchase. "Except she's not for sale," Pete said. "Never was. Her brother had no right to sell her, and even if he did, Mr. Mallory bought out that claim months ago, fair and legal. So you and your certain parties got no leg to stand on." Ashford's face darkened. "The transaction with her brother predates Mallory's involvement. That makes it the primary claim." "That's not how the law works," Clara interjected. "And even if it was, you think we're just going to hand over a woman and her newborn baby to people who wanted to use her as—" She stopped, her voice thick with disgust. "You're wasting your time. She's under Mr. Mallory's protection. That doesn't end just because he's away on business." Elena's heart hammered. They all knew. They all knew about Micah, knew she'd given birth, and they were protecting her anyway. Protecting both of them. Ashford's hand drifted toward his hip. Every ranch hand's rifle immediately raised, aimed squarely at him. He froze. "Don't," Pete said quietly. "You're outnumbered and outgunned. You make a move for that pistol and you'll be dead before you clear leather. Is this woman worth dying over?" For a long moment, nobody moved. Elena held her breath, one hand pressed against her racing heart, the other reaching toward Micah's cradle as if she could protect him through sheer will. Then Ashford stepped back, hands raised. "This isn't over. My employers don't give up easily. They'll send someone else, someone less inclined to talk." "Let them try," Clara said. "We'll be ready. Now get out." Ashford remounted, his face twisted with anger. "Tell the woman this. We know about the baby. That changes the value of what's owed. A woman with a child is worth less on the market, but my employers are willing to adjust their price expectations. They're reasonable people." "Out!" Clara raised the shotgun to her shoulder. "Before I show you just how reasonable I can be." Ashford wheeled his horse and kicked it into a gallop, disappearing back the way he'd come. The ranch hands held their positions until he was out of sight, then slowly relaxed. Elena sank to the floor beside Micah's cradle, shaking. They knew about the baby. Whoever Ashford worked for, whatever Silas had gotten himself into, it wasn't over, and now Micah was part of it, a liability that decreased her value but didn't eliminate the threat. Clara found her there minutes later, still on the floor, tears streaming down her face. The older woman sat beside her, pulling Elena against her shoulder. "We're not going to let anything happen to you," Clara said fiercely. "Or that baby, you hear me? Over my dead body will anyone take either of you from this ranch." "I should leave," Elena sobbed. "I'm putting you all in danger. I should take Micah and just... And go where? Do what? Elena, you're weak from childbirth. You have no money, no supplies, and a newborn baby. You'd last maybe 2 days on your own before something happened. Is that what you want for Micah?" "No, but..." "No buts. You're staying. We're protecting you. And when Rhett gets back..." Clara's voice gentled. "When Rhett gets back, this will all get sorted out. He'll know what to do. He always does." Elena wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe that Rhett would come home and somehow make everything right, make the threat disappear, make her and Micah safe. But Rhett had been gone almost 8 weeks now. His letter had said 10 days travel back once the cattle were sold. That meant he should return any day. But any day could be tomorrow or a week from now, depending on weather and circumstances. How long could they hold off Ashford's mysterious employers? How long before someone less reasonable came calling? Elena looked at her sleeping son and felt fear crystallize into something harder. Determination, resolve. Whatever came next, whatever threats materialized, she would protect Micah. She'd failed to protect herself from Silas, but she would not fail to protect her child. "Teach me," Elena said suddenly, pulling back from Clara's embrace. "Teach me to shoot properly. Not just point and pull the trigger, but really shoot. I need to be able to defend us if it comes to that." Clara studied her face, then nodded slowly. "All right. Once you're recovered enough, another week or so, we'll start with target practice and work up from there." That night, Elena wrote another letter to Rhett. A letter she had no way to send since she didn't know exactly where he was, but needed to write anyway. "Rhett," she wrote. "The baby came early. A boy. I named him Micah. He's perfect and tiny, and I love him more than I knew it was possible to love anything. I wish you were here to meet him. I wish you could see how beautiful he is. Ashford came back today. He knows about Micah. Whatever Silas got himself into, it's not over. I'm frightened. Not for me, but for my son. Claire and Pete are protecting us, but I can feel the danger circling like wolves around a wounded animal. Please come home soon. Please be safe. Please..." She stopped, the pen hovering over paper. "Please what? Please love me? Please want this baby even though he's not yours? Please look at this complicated situation and decide it's worth staying for?" Elena folded the letter and tucked it away in the drawer with Rhett's other letters to her, their one-sided correspondence that documented these months of separation. Maybe someday she'd give them to him. Maybe someday she'd be brave enough to let him see how much she'd come to need him. But not today. Today she had to be strong. Had to focus on survival, on protecting Micah, on making it through each day until Rhett returned. The following week crawled by with agonizing slowness. Elena recovered physically, regaining her strength, but remained constantly on edge. Every sound made her jump. Every rider on the horizon made her heart race until she could confirm it was someone familiar. She kept the pistol Clara had given her months ago close at hand, even while nursing Micah, even while sleeping. Clara started the shooting lessons as promised, taking Elena out to a distant corner of the property where they could practice without alarming the household. Elena proved a quick study, her natural steadiness and determination translating well to marksmanship. By the end of the week, she could hit a target reliably at 20 paces. "You're good," Clara admitted, pleased. "Better than half the men I've taught. Must be that artist's eye for detail." Elena didn't mention that she'd never been an artist, but she accepted the compliment anyway, grateful for any skill that might help her protect her son. Micah was thriving, growing stronger every day. He started focusing on faces, his dark blue eyes tracking movement. When Elena talked to him, He made small sounds back, not quite cooing yet, but the beginning of communication. Those moments, holding her son and watching him discover the world, were the only times Elena felt truly at peace. 10 days after Ashford's visit, Elena was in the garden with Micah, the baby wrapped snugly against her chest in a sling Clara had fashioned, when Marcus came running from the barn. "Riders coming!" he shouted. "Lots of them!" Elena's blood froze. This was it. Ashford had brought reinforcements. She turned to run for the house. Then Marcus's expression changed from alarm to joy. "Wait! It's Mr. Mallory! He's back!" Elena spun toward the horizon. There, silhouetted against the late afternoon sun, came a group of riders. Even at a distance, she recognized Rhett's posture, the way he sat his horse. He was back. After 8 weeks of worry and fear and loneliness, he was finally home. She wanted to run to him, wanted to race across the yard and throw herself into his arms. But her legs wouldn't move. Because now came the moment of truth. Now Rhett would see the baby, would see how everything had changed, and would decide if this was still what he wanted, if she was still what he wanted. The riders entered the yard in a cloud of dust and noise, men tired from weeks on the trail, horses equally exhausted, everyone ready to be home. Rhett dismounted and immediately started giving orders about the horses, checking on his men, falling back into his role as ranch owner and leader. Then his eyes found Elena across the yard. He stopped mid-sentence, whatever he'd been about to say forgotten. His gaze traveled from her face down to the bundle against her chest, and Elena saw the moment he understood. The baby had come. While he was gone, she'd gone through labor and birth alone. Well, with Clara, but without him. And now here she stood, forever changed, with a child in her arms. Rhett crossed the yard slowly, his expression unreadable. Elena's heart hammered so hard she thought it might bruise her ribs. This was it. Everything balanced on this moment, on how he reacted, on what he said or didn't say. He stopped in front of her, mud-stained and travel-worn, and more beautiful than Elena remembered. His eyes were shadowed with exhaustion, his jaw heavy with weeks of stubble, but he was here. He was real. He was home. "Elena," Rhett said, his voice rough from disuse or emotion or both. "You had the baby." 2 weeks ago." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "It came early. I'm sorry. I know you wanted to be here. Let me see." Elena's hands trembled as she carefully adjusted the sling, revealing Micah's face. The baby was awake, his dark blue eyes blinking in the late afternoon light. For a long moment, Rhett just stared at him, his face completely still. Then something happened to his expression. Something broke open, softened, transformed. He reached out one rough, calloused hand and gently touched Micah's cheek with his fingertip. The baby turned toward the touch, his mouth opening instinctively to root. "He's perfect," Rhett said, his voice thick. Elena, he's perfect." The tears Elena had been holding back finally spilled over. "His name is Micah." "Micah." Rhett tested the name, still staring at the baby with something like wonder. "That's a good name. Strong." Around them, the ranch hands were unpacking supplies, caring for horses, talking and laughing, the sounds of normal life resuming. But Elena and Rhett existed in a bubble of their own, the rest of the world fading to meaningless noise. "Can I—" Rhett hesitated. "Can I hold him?" Elena nodded, carefully extricating Micah from the sling. Rhett's hands were gentle as he took the baby, cradling him with surprising competence for someone who claimed no experience with children. Micah looked impossibly small in his large hands, but perfectly safe. "Hello, Micah," Rhett said softly. "I'm Rhett. I've been away, but I'm back now, and I'm—" His voice caught. "I'm so glad to meet you." Elena watched them together, this rough rancher and her tiny son, and felt something settle in her chest. This was right. This felt right in a way nothing else in her life ever had. Looking at them, she could almost believe in happy endings. Then Clara appeared on the porch. "Rhett, welcome home. We need to talk. Now. It's urgent." The moment shattered. Rhett looked up, immediately alert to the tension in Clara's voice. "What happened?" "Ashford came back 10 days ago. He knows about the baby, and he's threatening to send someone worse." Rhett's expression hardened into something Elena had never seen before. Cold, dangerous, absolutely focused. He looked down at Micah, still cradled in his arms, and his jaw set. "Nobody," he said quietly, "is taking this child, or his mother, over my dead body." He looked at Elena then, and she saw the promise in his eyes, the commitment, the absolute certainty. Whatever happened next, whatever threats materialized, Rhett would stand between them and danger, would fight for them, would protect them as if they were his own. "If you'll have me," Rhett said, his voice low enough that only Elena could hear, "I'd like to be his father, not just in name, but truly. I want to raise him, protect him, give him everything he needs and deserves." He paused, then continued, "And I'd like to be your husband, Elena, if you'll have me. If this is something you want too." Elena stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. Was he proposing? Here, now, in the middle of the yard with his men unpacking and danger circling and everything so complicated and messy? "You don't have to answer now," Rhett added quickly, seeing her shock. "I know it's sudden. I know this isn't the romantic proposal you might have imagined, but I needed you to know. I want this. I want you. I want this child. I want us to be a family, legally and completely. Will you think about it?" Elena looked down at her son in Rhett's arms, at the way Rhett held him like something precious, like something worth fighting for. She thought about these months of slowly building trust, of discovering that kindness existed, that protection didn't have to come with strings attached. She thought about how Rhett had stepped out of the shadows that first night and bought her freedom, how he'd given her his mother's quilt in his brother's room, how he'd written to her from the trail, asking about her well-being, caring about her life. "Yes," Elena whispered. Rhett blinked. "Yes, you'll think about it." "Yes, I'll marry you." Tears streamed down Elena's face, but she was smiling, actually smiling. Yes to all of it. Yes to being a family. Yes to you being Micah's father. Just yes. For a moment, Rhett looked stunned. Then slowly, carefully, mindful of the baby in his arms, he leaned forward and kissed Elena's forehead, chaste, gentle, but full of promise. "Then we'll do this right," he said. "Soon as we handle the Ashford situation, soon as everything's safe, we'll get married properly, make everything legal, make sure you and Micah are protected in every way possible." Clara cleared her throat loudly from the porch. "This is all very touching, but we still have a problem that needs addressing. Now." Rhett handed Micah back to Elena reluctantly. "Take him inside. I need to hear everything that happened while I was gone, and then we're going to make a plan. Nobody threatens my family and gets away with it." My family. The words wrapped around Elena like a warm blanket. She was part of a family again. Not the broken, dysfunctional family of her birth, but a real family. One built on choice and care and commitment. She carried Micah into the house, leaving Rhett to confer with Clara and Pete about the threats they faced. Through the window, she watched him gesturing, talking, planning, taking charge the way he always did, solving problems, protecting his own. And now she and Micah were his own. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Elena watched through the window as Rhett gathered his men in a tight circle near the barn, his posture all business now, the tenderness he'd shown with Micah locked away behind the armor of leadership. She couldn't hear what he was saying, but she could see the effect of his words on the ranch hands, backs straightening, jaws setting, hands moving to check weapons. They were preparing for war. Clara came upstairs an hour later, her face drawn with worry, but determined. She found Elena nursing Micah in the rocking chair, the baby's small fingers curled around Elena's thumb as he fed. "Rhett's putting together a plan," Clara said, sitting heavily in the chair by the window. "He sent Billy into town to talk to the sheriff, see if we can get the law on our side. Pete and Marcus are fortifying the house, bars on the ground floor windows, extra ammunition distributed, escape routes planned if it comes to that." "It shouldn't have to come to any of that," Elena said, her voice tight. "This is my fault. My problem. You should nothing." Clara's voice was sharp. "This is Silas's fault, and the fault of whatever vultures he sold you to. You're the victim here, Elena. Don't you dare start thinking otherwise." Elena looked down at Micah, now drowsy and satisfied, his small body warm and trusting against her. How could she have brought such danger to this innocent life? What kind of mother was she? As if reading her thoughts, Clara leaned forward. You're doing exactly what a good mother should do. Accepting help when it's offered, letting people who care about you protect your child. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. Before Elena could respond, footsteps sounded on the stairs. Rhett appeared in the doorway, his face grim but determined. His eyes went immediately to Micah, and some of the hardness in his expression softened. How is he? Rhett asked. Perfect, Elena said, completely oblivious to all this danger swirling around him. Good. That's how it should be. Rhett moved into the room, his presence filling the space in a way that should have felt overwhelming, but instead felt comforting. Safe. I need to tell you what I learned on the trail, about Ashford and who he works for. Elena's stomach dropped. You know? I made some inquiries in Kansas while we were selling the cattle. Ashford's name came up when I was asking around about certain types of businesses. Rhett's jaw tightened. He works for a man named Luther Keene. Keene runs a string of establishments across the Western Territories. Saloons, brothels, gambling houses, places where young women who have nowhere else to go end up working off debts they never agreed to take on. The room seemed to tilt. Elena had heard whispers about such places, such men. Every woman on the frontier had. They were the nightmare that lurked at the edges of polite society, the fate worse than death that mothers warned daughters about. Silas sold me to them, Elena said, the words ash in her mouth. He sold me to a brothel. He tried to, Rhett corrected firmly. He didn't succeed. I bought you first, and in the eyes of the law, corrupt as that law might be, that makes you mine to protect. Keene's claim is invalid. But he doesn't see it that way. No, men like Keene don't accept losing their merchandise easily. The $300 your brother took was pocket change to him. It's the principle. If word gets out that someone defied him and got away with it, others might try the same. He can't allow that. Clara made a disgusted sound. So this is about pride, about power. He doesn't even care about Elena specifically. She's just a symbol to him. Exactly. Rhett moved to the window, looking out over the darkening ranch. Which means he won't stop coming, not unless we give him a reason to. What kind of reason? Elena asked, fear making her voice small. Rhett turned back to face her, and the look in his eyes was dangerous in a way she'd never seen before. The kind that makes it more expensive to keep pursuing you than to walk away. The kind that involves the law, witnesses, and consequences he can't easily escape. Over the next 2 days, Rhett orchestrated what could only be called a strategic campaign. Billy returned from town with Sheriff Morrison, a weathered man in his 50s who'd known Rhett's father and claimed to owe the family a debt. The sheriff listened to Elena's story, examined the timeline of events, and agreed to file official papers declaring Elena under Rhett Mallory's legal protection, not as property, but as an employee and resident of the ranch. Won't stop Keene if he's determined, the sheriff admitted, but it puts the law officially on your side. He comes after her. He's not just dealing with you anymore. He's dealing with territorial law. Rhett also contacted a lawyer in Kansas City, a man he'd done business with during the cattle sale. Papers were drawn up, not just declaring Elena's status, but also making provisions for Micah. In the eyes of the law, Rhett was establishing himself as the child's legal guardian and protector. Once we're married, Rhett explained to Elena as they sat together on the porch that evening, Micah sleeping in her arms, these protections become even stronger. A man's wife and children are his legal responsibility. Keene would have to go through me to get to you, and that becomes a much more complicated proposition. You're really going to marry me, Elena said, still struggling to believe it. Even knowing all the complications, even knowing Ashford and Keene won't just disappear. Rhett looked at her, his winter frost eyes warm in the lamplight. Elena, I didn't buy you that night in town because I wanted a housekeeper or a ranch hand. I bought you because something in me couldn't walk away, couldn't leave you to that fate. And every day since, I've watched you grow stronger, braver, more beautiful. You've made this place feel like a home instead of just a business. You've made me remember what it feels like to care about something beyond cattle and land. He reached out and gently touched Micah's tiny hand. his finger so large compared to the baby's delicate fingers. And this little one. I know he's not mine by blood, but I meant what I said. I want to be his father, want to teach him to ride and work and be a good man, want to protect him from everything your brother and men like Keen represent. Elena's throat tightened with emotion. Why? Why would you take all this on? Because saving you saved me, Rhett said simply. I was becoming like this ranch, functional, efficient, but empty. Going through the motions of living without really feeling alive. You changed that. You and Micah both. You gave me a reason to come home instead of just a place to return to. Before Elena could respond, Marcus came running around the corner of the house. Mr. Mallory, riders approaching, 3 of them, and one looks like Ashford. Rhett was on his feet instantly. Get inside, he told Elena. Upstairs, away from the windows. Clara will stay with you. And Elena, he paused. No matter what you hear, don't come down. Trust me to handle this. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could help, could fight, but she looked down at Micah, still sleeping peacefully, and knew her place was here, protecting her son, letting the people who loved her do what they did best. She went inside, Clara following close behind. From the upstairs window, hidden behind the curtain, Elena watched as 3 riders entered the yard. Ashford was indeed one of them, but the other 2 were different, harder men, the kind whose eyes held no light, no mercy. Men who'd done terrible things and would do more without hesitation. Rhett stood in the center of the yard, Pete and Marcus flanking him. Tom and the other ranch hands had positioned themselves strategically around the property, on the barn roof, behind the fence, near the house. Not obvious, but ready. Ashford, Rhett said, his voice carrying clearly in the evening air. You were told not to come back. I'm just delivering a message, Ashford said, his earlier confidence replaced by something that looked like fear. The 2 men with him radiated violence in a way that made even Ashford nervous. These gentlemen represent Mr. Keen. They'd like to discuss the situation. One of the hard men dismounted, tall, rail-thin, with a scar running from his temple to his jaw. Rhett Mallory, I've heard about you, cattle rancher, honest businessman, well-respected in these parts. His voice was surprisingly cultured, at odds with his appearance. My name is Crane. I work for Luther Keen, resolving disputes. There's no dispute, Rhett said calmly. Elena Carver is under my legal protection. She's employed by this ranch, lives on this property, and as of next week will be my wife. Whatever claim Keen thinks he has died the night I outbid his representatives. Crane smiled, showing too many teeth. Mr. Keen sees things differently. He invested money in acquiring Miss Carver. He expects a return on that investment. Then he should take it up with Silas Carver, who took his money under false pretenses. Elena is not property. She never was. And she's certainly not merchandise to be bought and sold. Philosophical distinctions, Crane said dismissively. The fact remains, Rhett interrupted, his voice hardening, that she's under the protection of territorial law. Sheriff Morrison has the papers. Any attempt to take her or her child will be treated as kidnapping. That's a hanging offense in these parts. The second hard man spoke for the first time, his voice rough as gravel. Hanging requires catching us first. Won't be hard. Rhett gestured casually, and ranch hands emerged from their hiding spots, rifles trained on the 3 visitors. You're surrounded, you're outgunned, and you're on my land. So here's how this is going to work. You're going to ride back to Keen and tell him the Elena Carver situation is closed. Tell him pursuing it further will cost him more than $300. It'll cost him his reputation, possibly his freedom, maybe his life. Because I'm not just a rancher. I'm a man with connections, resources, and a very strong motivation to protect my family. Push me, and I'll push back in ways he won't like. Crane's smile faded. You're making a dangerous enemy, Mallory. No. Keen made a dangerous enemy when he threatened my family. Now he's going to deal with the consequences. For a long moment, nobody moved. The ranch hands kept their rifles steady. Rhett stood perfectly still, absolutely confident. And the 3 visitors slowly seemed to realize they'd walked into a situation they couldn't win. Crane remounted his horse. We'll deliver your message, but I can't promise Mr. Keene will accept it. Then he's welcome to come here himself and we can discuss it face to face. Rhett's voice was cold as winter ice. But he should know that if he does, he better bring more than 2 hired guns. It'll take an army to get through what I've built here. The 3 visitors rode away, Ashford casting one last fearful look over his shoulder. The ranch hands held their positions until the riders disappeared from sight, then slowly relaxed. Elena sagged against the window frame, her legs suddenly weak. Clara caught her elbow, steadying her. "It's all right," Clara said. "Rhett handled it. He'll keep handling it." But Elena knew this wasn't over. Men like Keene didn't give up just because someone stood up to them. They found other ways, other angles. They waited until your guard was down and struck when you were vulnerable. That night, unable to sleep, Elena sat in the rocking chair with Micah while Rhett kept watch downstairs. She could hear him moving around, checking locks, looking out windows, protecting them. Around midnight, she heard footsteps on the stairs. Rhett appeared in her doorway, his face exhausted but alert. "Can't sleep?" he asked softly. "Too scared," Elena admitted. "Too worried about what happens next." Rhett came into the room, pulling the other chair close to hers. "I need to tell you something. About tomorrow." Elena's heart clenched. "What about tomorrow?" "We're getting married. Tomorrow. I've already made the arrangements with Reverend Walsh. He's riding out here at noon." "Tomorrow?" Elena's voice rose slightly, making Micah stir. She lowered it. "Rhett, that's too soon. We need to make this legal as fast as possible," Rhett interrupted gently. "Every day you're not my wife is a day Keene can exploit some legal loophole, claim some jurisdiction. Once we're married, you and Micah are legally my family. That gives us protections we don't have now." "So this is just strategy? Legal protection?" Rhett leaned forward, taking her free hand in his. "It's that, yes. But Elena, it's also what I want. What I've wanted for months now, even if I was too stubborn or scared to admit it. I want you as my wife. Not just to protect you, but because I—" He stopped, struggling with words. "Because I love you. I think I've loved you since that night in town when you tried to bite that man and then looked at me like you couldn't decide if I was rescue or just a different kind of danger." Elena's breath caught. "You love me." "I love you," Rhett repeated, more confident now. "I love your strength, your courage, the way you've built a life here from nothing. I love how you talk to Micah like he understands every word. I love watching you in the garden, the way you bite your lip when you're concentrating. I love—" He stopped, emotion making his voice rough. "I love all of it, all of you. And I want to spend the rest of my life proving that to you, if you'll let me." Tears streamed down Elena's face. "I love you too," she whispered. "I was so afraid to admit it, even to myself. Afraid that if I cared about you, something would take you away. But Rhett, I do. I love you. And I want to marry you. Not just for protection, but because I want to build a life with you. Want Micah to grow up calling you Papa. Want to wake up next to you for the rest of my life." Rhett cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. Then slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, he leaned in and kissed her. It was nothing like Elena had imagined her first real kiss would be. There was no desperation, no grasping hunger, just tenderness and promise and a depth of feeling that made her chest ache. Rhett kissed her like she was precious, like she was something to be cherished rather than consumed. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Rhett rested his forehead against hers. "Tomorrow," he said. "We do this tomorrow. Make everything official. Make everything real." "Tomorrow," Elena agreed. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the first real bite of autumn in the air. Clara took charge of preparations with military efficiency, producing a dress she'd been secretly altering, one of her own from years ago, remade to fit Elena's smaller frame. It was simple blue cotton, nothing fancy, but it was clean and pretty and made Elena feel almost beautiful. "You are beautiful," Clara corrected when Elena said as much. "Rhett's going to forget how to breathe when he sees you." The ceremony was held in the main room of the house, hastily cleaned and decorated with whatever Clara could find. Wildflowers from the meadow, candles on every surface, Rhett's mother's quilt draped over the settee. The ranch hands cleaned up as best they could, slicking back their hair and changing into what passed for Sunday clothes. Reverend Walsh arrived exactly at noon, a portly man with kind eyes who'd known Rhett since he was a boy. He took in the situation, the hastily arranged ceremony, the armed ranch hands keeping watch through the windows, the young woman with a newborn baby, and seemed to understand more than was said. "Well then," the Reverend said cheerfully, "let's make this official, shall we?" Elena stood in the center of the room, Micah in Clara's arms since she couldn't hold him and hold Rhett's hands simultaneously. Rhett stood across from her, cleaned up and wearing what was probably his only good shirt, his hair still damp from washing. He looked nervous, Elena realized with surprise. This confident, capable man was nervous about marrying her. The realization steadied her own nerves. They were in this together. Reverend Walsh began the ceremony, the traditional words taking on new meaning in this context. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." Elena barely heard the words. She was too focused on Rhett, on the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the world, on the way his hands trembled slightly when he took hers, on the absolute certainty in his eyes when he spoke his vows. "I, Rhett Mallory, take you, Elena Carver, to be my wife. I promise to love you, protect you, and honor you for all the days of my life. I promise to be a father to Micah, to raise him as my own son, to give him everything I have and everything I am. I promise that my home is your home, my life is your life, and nothing, nothing will ever change that." Then it was Elena's turn. Her voice shook but held steady. "I, Elena Carver, take you, Rhett Mallory, to be my husband. I promise to love you, trust you, and stand beside you through whatever comes. I promise that my son will know you as his father, that we will build a life together founded on honesty and respect and the kind of love that doesn't ask for anything except to be allowed to give. I promise that your home is my home, your family is my family, and I will spend the rest of my life proving myself worthy of the gift you've given me." "I'm not sure rings were planned," Reverend Walsh said gently. Rhett produced a simple gold band from his pocket, his mother's wedding ring, Elena realized with a shock. The most precious thing he owned, and he was giving it to her. He slipped it onto her finger, his touch reverent. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting all these years for Elena's hand. "By the power vested in me, by the territory, and by God," Reverend Walsh intoned, "I pronounce you husband and wife. Rhett, you may kiss your bride." And he did. In front of the Reverend and Clara and all the ranch hands, Rhett kissed his wife like she was his salvation. And maybe she was. Maybe they'd saved each other, him from loneliness, her from despair, both of them from lives half-lived. When they broke apart, the room erupted in cheers. The ranch hands clapped and whistled. Clara dabbed at her eyes with her apron. Even stern Reverend Walsh was smiling. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Mallory," he said warmly. "May your marriage be blessed with health, happiness, and peace." Peace. Elena wanted to believe in it, wanted to trust that this marriage would somehow magically solve all their problems. But she knew better. Keen was still out there. The threat hadn't disappeared just because she and Rhett had said vows. As if summoning trouble with her thoughts, Marcus burst through the door. "Riders! At least a dozen of them, heavily armed, coming fast." The celebration died instantly. Rhett's expression hardened into something Elena recognized now, the face he wore when protecting what was his. "Elena, upstairs with Micah," he ordered. "Clara, go with her. Everyone else, defensive positions. Nobody fires unless I give the order, but be ready." Elena wanted to argue, wanted to stay and fight beside him, but Clara was already pulling her toward the stairs, and Micah was starting to fuss, sensing the tension. Her place was with her son, keeping him safe. From the upstairs window, Elena watched the riders approach. A dozen men, all armed, all looking like they meant business. At their head rode a man she didn't recognize, well-dressed, middle-aged, with the kind of face that might have been handsome before cruelty hardened it into something ugly. "That's Keen," Clara breathed beside her. "He came himself." Rhett stepped out onto the porch, his stance relaxed but his hand near his pistol. Pete and the other ranch hands were positioned strategically, weapons ready but not yet aimed. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Keene pulled up his horse in the center of the yard. Rhett Mallory, I've heard a lot about you. Then you know I meant what I told your men, Rhett said calmly. Elena is my wife now. Legally married as of an hour ago, with witnesses and official documentation. Your claim, such as it was, is void. I disagree. Keene dismounted, his movements casual but calculated. The debt existed before your marriage. That makes it still collectible. Not how the law works, but even if it was, Rhett's voice hardened. You're not taking her. You're not taking her child. You can bring an army, Keene, and the answer will still be no. I did bring an army. Keene gestured at his men. More than enough to overwhelm your ranch hands. Maybe, but you're still going to lose. How do you figure? Rhett smiled, and there was nothing kind in it. Because while you were writing here, Sheriff Morrison was writing to the territorial governor with a full report on your business practices. Names, dates, women you've trafficked, laws you've broken. I spent my time in Kansas City very productively, Keene. Talked to a lot of people, gathered a lot of evidence. You take Elena, and that evidence goes public. You'll hang before Christmas. The color drained from Keene's face. You're bluffing. Test me. Rhett's voice was pure steel. I'm a rancher, Keene. I know how to play a long game. I've been planning this since the day Ashford first showed up. You think I'd let you threaten my family without having a backup plan? Multiple backup plans? For the first time, uncertainty crossed Keene's expression. He looked at his men, at the ranch hands surrounding them, at the house where he knew Elena was hiding, calculating odds, weighing options. Plus, Rhett continued conversationally, you kill me or hurt anyone here, and that evidence still goes public. I've made arrangements. My lawyer has instructions. So even if you win today, you lose everything. Your business, your freedom, your life. Is $300 and your pride really worth that? The silence stretched so long Elena thought her heart might stop. This was it. Either Keene would back down or everything would explode into violence that might kill them all. Finally, Keene laughed, a bitter, frustrated sound. You're a clever man, Mallory. More clever than I gave you credit for. I protect what's mine. Elena is mine. Micah is mine. This ranch is mine. And I will burn down your entire empire to keep them safe. Believe that. Keene stared at Rhett for another long moment, then shook his head. She must be one hell of a woman to inspire this kind of devotion. She is. Fine. You win. This time. Keene remounted his horse. But Mallory, if you ever cross my path again, if you ever interfere with my business again, we're going to have a very different conversation. Stay away from my family, and our paths never have to cross, Rhett said. But come after what's mine again, and you'll discover exactly how far I'm willing to go. Keene and his men rode away, dust rising in their wake. Elena waited until they were completely out of sight before allowing herself to breathe. It was over. It was really over. She flew down the stairs, Micah clutched against her chest, and burst out onto the porch just as Rhett turned from watching Keene's departure. Their eyes met across the yard, and Elena saw everything she felt reflected back. Relief, exhaustion, triumph, love. Rhett crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides and pulled her into his arms, careful of Micah between them. He buried his face in her hair, his whole body shaking with released tension. It's done, he murmured. It's really done. You're safe. You're both safe. Elena sobbed into his chest, months of fear finally releasing. You did it. You saved us. We saved each other, Rhett corrected, pulling back to look at her face. You saved me first, Elena. Gave me something worth fighting for, worth living for. Around them, the ranch hands were celebrating, whooping and clapping each other on the back. Clara stood on the porch with tears streaming down her face, smiling so wide it looked like it might split her face. Reverend Walsh, who'd watched the whole confrontation from the doorway, nodded approvingly. Well, the Reverend said, that's certainly the most exciting wedding I've ever performed. You two have quite a story to tell your grandchildren someday. Grandchildren? The word conjured images Elena had never dared imagine, a future stretching out before them, full of possibilities. Micah growing up strong and loved, maybe more children eventually if they were blessed, growing old together on this ranch that had become home. That evening, after the ranch hands had celebrated with an impromptu feast Clara threw together, after Reverend Walsh had ridden back to town with news of the Mallorys' dramatic wedding day, after Micah had been fed and changed and put to bed in the cradle beside Elena and Rhett's bed, their bed now, shared by husband and wife, Elena stood on the porch with Rhett, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything. For buying me that night, for giving me a home, for accepting Micah, for fighting for us, for—" Rhett silenced her with a kiss, gentle and lingering. "Stop thanking me for treating you the way you've always deserved to be treated, the way everyone deserves to be treated. Still, I need you to know you changed my life, you saved my life, and you saved mine," Rhett repeated. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest, both of them looking out over the ranch, their home. "I was dying by inches out here, Elena, just going through the motions. Then you arrived, terrified and defiant and so damn brave, and suddenly everything meant something again." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, the night sounds of the ranch surrounding them, cattle lowing in distant pastures, horses shifting in their stalls, the wind rustling through the grass. Home sounds, family sounds. "What happens now?" Elena asked. "Now that the threat is gone and we're married and everything's settled?" "Now?" Rhett's voice was warm with amusement and affection. "Now we live. We raise Micah. We run this ranch. We build the life we want instead of just surviving the life we got handed. We teach our son that family isn't about blood. It's about choice and commitment and love. And maybe, if we're very lucky, we get to be happy." "I think we already are," Elena said, turning in his arms to face him. "Happy, I mean. Right now, right here. I don't think I've ever been this happy in my entire life." Rhett smiled, one of those rare, full smiles that transformed his entire face. "Then my work here is done. Mrs. Mallory, would you like to come inside and let me show you just how much I love my wife?" Elena blushed but smiled back. "I would like that very much, Mr. Mallory." They went inside together, closing the door on the past and all its pain. Upstairs, Micah slept peacefully, completely unaware that his life had just been secured, his future guaranteed by a man who'd chosen to be his father, who would teach him to ride and work and be good, who would protect him from the darkness Elena had known. That night, as Elena lay in Rhett's arms, her body finally relaxed and safe, she thought about how far she'd come, from a girl running through moonlit grass away from her brother's betrayal, to a woman secure in her husband's love and her son's future, from having nothing to having everything that mattered. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Rhett murmured back, already half asleep. "Always will. You and Micah both, my family, my salvation." Because that's what they'd become to each other. Salvation. He'd saved her from a fate worse than death. She'd saved him from a life half-lived. And together they'd created something beautiful from circumstances that should have destroyed them both. The years that followed proved Rhett right about everything. Micah grew strong and healthy, his dark hair and bright eyes a constant joy. By the time he was 3, he followed Rhett everywhere, mimicking his walk, trying to help with ranch work in ways that were more hindrance than help but utterly endearing. Rhett taught him to ride before he could properly walk, sitting the boy in front of him on the patient bay gelding and showing him how to hold the reins, how to read an animal's mood, how to be gentle but firm. Watching them together, Elena's heart swelled so full she thought it might burst. This was what a father should be. This was what family meant. 2 years after Micah's birth, Elena gave Rhett a daughter, Sarah, named after his mother. She came into the world screaming her displeasure at the cold and the light, but calmed immediately when Rhett held her, his large hands cradling her tiny body with infinite gentleness. "Hello, little one," he whispered, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. "I'm your papa, and I'm going to love you and protect you every single day of your life." Micah, now old enough to understand he had a sister, was fascinated by the baby. He brought her things, rocks, flowers, his favorite toys, trying to make her smile. And when Sarah was old enough to laugh, It was Micah who could coax the biggest giggles from her. Clara, growing older but no less fierce, doted on both children shamelessly. She taught Micah his letters and numbers, told him stories about his grandparents he'd never met, made sure he knew he was loved and wanted and valued. She did the same for Sarah, creating a home full of warmth and laughter and the kind of security Elena had never known growing up. The ranch prospered under Rhett's management. The cattle drives became annual events, always profitable, always carefully planned. Rhett brought in new breeding stock, expanded the grazing land, built a reputation for quality and honesty that drew buyers from across the territory. But he never again took a drive that lasted more than 4 weeks. Never again left his family for so long that he missed important moments. He'd learned his lesson. Business mattered, but family mattered more. Elena thrived in ways she'd never imagined possible. She learned to truly run the household, became an accomplished cook under Clara's tutelage, developed a talent for managing the ranch's finances that surprised everyone, including herself. Rhett consulted her on major decisions, valued her opinion, treated her as a true partner in every sense. She also learned to shoot even better, practiced regularly, and carried a pistol whenever she rode out alone, not because she expected trouble, but because being able to defend herself gave her a sense of control over her own fate that she'd never had before. Rhett understood this and encouraged it, never making her feel weak or foolish for needing that security. 5 years after their dramatic wedding, on a summer evening very much like the one when Elena had first arrived at Broken Creek, the family gathered on the porch. Micah was teaching Sarah how to catch lightning bugs in a jar, their laughter ringing out across the yard. Clara sat in her rocking chair, mending by lamplight, humming tunelessly. The ranch hands were finishing their evening chores, their voices carrying in the still air. Elena sat beside Rhett on the porch swing he'd built for their second anniversary, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. They watched their children play, watched their family exist in this moment of perfect peace. "Happy?" Rhett asked softly. "Beyond words," Elena replied. "You?" "More than I ever thought possible." He kissed the top of her head. "You know what I was thinking about today?" "What?" "That night in town. When I first saw you, you looked so terrified and so fierce all at once, like you were fighting with everything you had even though you knew you were going to lose." His voice went thick with emotion. "I'm so glad I didn't walk away. So glad I stepped in. Because if I hadn't, I would have missed all of this. You, the children, this life we've built." Elena lifted her head to look at him, seeing her own emotions reflected in his eyes. "Saving me saved you." "Saving you saved me," Rhett agreed. He glanced at the children, at Clara, at the ranch spread out around them in the gathering dusk. "This is what I was missing without knowing it. This is what I needed: family, love, home. And you gave me all of it, Elena. You and that brave heart of yours that refused to break no matter what life threw at it." "We gave it to each other," Elena corrected. "We built this together." "Together," Rhett agreed, pulling her close again. "Always together." Micah ran up to the porch, fireflies glowing in his jar, his face alight with joy. "Mama, Papa, look how many we caught." Sarah toddled after her brother, arms outstretched, demanding to be picked up. Rhett scooped her into his lap while Elena admired Micah's collection, praising his skill at catching the elusive insects. This was happiness, Elena thought. Not the absence of hardship. They'd had plenty of challenges over the years, obstacles to overcome, problems to solve. But facing those challenges together as a family made them bearable, made them almost worthwhile, because overcoming them together only made their bonds stronger. Later that night, after the children were asleep and Clara had retired to her room, Elena and Rhett lay in bed together, the window open to let in the cool night breeze. Rhett traced lazy patterns on her arm, his touch familiar and comforting. "I got a letter today," he said quietly, "from Sheriff Morrison." Elena tensed slightly. "About what?" "Keene. He was arrested 6 months ago on charges of human trafficking. The trial just ended. He's been sentenced to 20 years. Elena absorbed this information, trying to understand what she felt. Not triumph exactly, though she wasn't sorry to hear Keene had finally faced justice. More like closure. The man who'd threatened her family, who'd represented everything dark and terrifying about her past, could never hurt them now. "Good," she said simply. That's good. The letter also mentioned Silas. Elena went still. She hadn't thought about her brother in years, had deliberately pushed him from her mind. What about him? He's dead. Got himself killed in a card game in Denver about a year ago. Accused someone of cheating and drew on the wrong man. Elena waited for grief, for sorrow, for some echo of the bond they'd once shared as children. But there was nothing. Silas had killed whatever love she'd had for him the night he sold her. His death meant nothing except confirmation that she'd never have to worry about him trying to harm her or her children. I'm sorry, Rhett said, misinterpreting her silence. I'm not. Elena turned to face him in the darkness. He made his choices, Rhett. I made mine. And I'm so grateful my choices led me here, to you, to this life. Whatever Silas got, he earned. I'm just glad he can never hurt anyone else the way he hurt me. Rhett pulled her close, and they lay together in the quiet, both thinking about the past and how it had shaped their present, about the paths they'd walked to get here, the pain they'd endured, the joy they'd found despite it all. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been in that saloon that night? Rhett asked. Elena shuddered, not wanting to imagine that alternate reality. Sometimes, but I try not to, because this is what happened. You were there. You saved me, and we built something beautiful from something terrible. We did, didn't we? Rhett's voice held wonder, as if he still couldn't quite believe their good fortune. We really did. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, secure in the knowledge that whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together, as husband and wife, as partners, as the family they'd chosen to be. Years continued to pass, each one adding to the foundation they'd built. Micah grew into a fine young man, strong and kind, with Rhett's work ethic and Elena's compassionate heart. He never asked about his biological father. Rhett was the only father he'd ever known or needed, and that was enough. Sarah became a force of nature, stubborn and smart, keeping her older brother on his toes and making both her parents laugh with her precocious observations about life. She looked like Elena but had Rhett's steady temperament, a perfect blend of both her parents. Clara eventually passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 72, surrounded by the family she'd helped create. They buried her in the small cemetery on the hill overlooking the ranch, next to Rhett's parents and the brother he'd lost as a child. Her headstone read, Clara Boone, beloved friend, fierce protector, heart of this home. The ranch continued to thrive, now worked by Rhett and Micah together, with Sarah showing every sign of being just as interested in cattle and horses as her brother. Elena managed the business side with skill and confidence she'd never imagined possessing, her early life of hardship having taught her the value of money and security. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Rhett took Elena back to the hill where they'd buried Clara, where they could see the entire ranch spread out below them, the house they'd expanded to accommodate their growing family, the barns and outbuildings that had multiplied over the years, the pastures full of cattle and horses, the garden that Elena still tended every summer. 20 years, Rhett said, shaking his head. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, sometimes it feels like forever. Both, Elena agreed. It's both. They sat together in the grass, Elena leaning against Rhett's shoulder the way she had 1,000 times before. From the house below, they could hear Sarah calling for her mother, something about dinner preparations. Micah was working with one of the new ranch hands, teaching the younger man the skills Rhett had taught him. Do you ever regret it? Elena asked quietly. Taking me on that night? All the complications that came with me? Rhett looked at her like she'd lost her mind. Elena Mallory, you are the best decision I ever made. You and Micah and Sarah. You're everything. The ranch, the cattle, the money. That's all just means to an end. You're the end. You're what it's all for. He kissed her then, slow and sweet, the kiss of a man who'd loved his wife for 20 years and would love her for 20 more, for however many years they had left together. I love you, Elena whispered against his lips. Thank you for seeing me that night, for stepping in, for giving us this life. No, Rhett corrected gently. Thank you for being brave enough to survive, for being strong enough to heal, for being willing to trust me when you had every reason not to trust anyone. You saved me, Elena. More than I saved you. You gave me a reason to live instead of just existing." They sat on the hill as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold and pink. Below them, their children prepared dinner, the house warm with light and life and love. Around them, the ranch they'd built together spread out in every direction, a testament to what two broken people could create when they chose each other, chose hope, chose love. Elena thought about that terrified girl running through moonlit grass, about the desperate woman standing in a saloon while men bid on her like livestock, about the broken soul who'd climbed onto a stranger's horse and trusted him to take her somewhere safe. That girl would have never believed this future was possible, would have never imagined that love could be kind instead of cruel, that family could mean safety instead of betrayal, that life could be full of joy instead of mere survival. But it was possible. It was real. It was here, now, in this moment and all the moments that had led to it. "Come on," Rhett said, standing and helping Elena to her feet. "Let's go home. Our family is waiting." Our family. The most beautiful words Elena had ever heard. They walked down the hill together, hand in hand, toward the house full of light and laughter, and the family they'd created from courage and choice and a love that refused to be defeated by circumstance. Saving her had saved him. And together, they'd saved each other from loneliness, from darkness, from lives half-lived. They'd built something beautiful from something broken, created hope from despair, forged a family from two wounded souls who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen to walk into the light together. And as the stars emerged one by one in the Nebraska sky, as their children's laughter rang out from the house, as the ranch settled into evening quiet, Elena and Rhett crossed the threshold of their home, together, always together, the way they'd face everything life brought them for all the years to come. This was their salvation. This was their happy ending. This was love.